I don't see one.
We talked to them, but we weren't sure if we were getting them or not tonight.
Tom, do you want to lead us in the pledge?
I have a flag. Do you need a flag?
All right, I'll stand up.
Okay, hold on. Let me hit the record. So we're gonna now,
How about this?
all right, we're recording. Good.
Where's your flag?
All right, so all rise
All rise.
for the
Ready?
Pledge of Allegiance, led by Tom Statler.
I pledge allegiance
Allegiance
Flag
flag
of the
of the
United
United States of America,
To the republic for which
which it stands,
one
nation,
under God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you, everybody. This is the Town of New Canaan Town Council regular meeting for Wednesday, October 21, 2020. It is 7:01, and this is a virtual meeting, a Zoom meeting, and we've begun already with the Pledge of Allegiance. Now we'll move to the roll call. Rich.
Okay, Robin Bates Mason,
Here.
Tom Butterworth,
here,
Liz Donovan,
Here.
John Engel,
Here.
Sven England,
here,
Mark Jemsky, here, Steve Carl,
here,
Mike Morrow. I don't see him. Maria Naughton,
Here.
Christina Ross,
Here.
Rich Townsend, here, Penny.
Here.
Okay, you have 11 of 12. There's a quorum.
Excellent. So the meeting is open, called to order. Second item of business is the minutes, approval of the minutes for the September 16, 2020 regular meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? Steve,
To move.
second by Penny. Any discussion on the minutes? Are these the last minutes by Tom Stadler? Yes, okay, these are the last time we get minutes by Tom Stadler. No doubt they are literature. Do I have a vote to approve the minutes? Raise your hand. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I see 9 people on my screen. Okay, the minutes are approved. Excellent. Now we move to public comments. Members of the public are welcome to speak to the town council. Let me know in the chat window if you want to speak or speak up. But if you're muted, you can let me know in the chat window. Members of the public are welcome to speak to the town council on agenda topics scheduled for review and or vote. Speakers are requested to provide their name and street address, and comments will be limited to 2 or 3 minutes, subject to the total number of speakers. Does anyone wish to address the council? I think there is nobody asking. So there being none, we'll move on to the next order of business. Housing Authority. No, first, we just see, look at that. We skipped the first selectman's update, just like that. We'll go back to the first selectman's update. Does the first selectman, are you ready?
I'm ready, John.
Okay, go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Good to see you all by Zoom. First of all, I'd actually like to go back to Tom Stadler and acknowledge and recognize Tom's retirement coming up in another week. Tom, for 12 years, has done yeoman service for the town of New Canaan. I, for one, have really appreciated working with him the last 3 years. And the good news is Tom's going to agree to stay on for 1 day a week for several months and help Tucker further transition. And because he has so much institutional knowledge that we really can't afford to let him go out the door entirely. So, Tom, thank you. I don't know if anybody, John, you want to say a few words yourself?
I'll just say from a personal point of view, that Tom's been invaluable for me. I rely on Tom a tremendous amount. I am always asking Tom's advice on how to move something through the town council. How does government work? I just asked him 15 minutes ago whether the town council could could basically veto everything that the first selectman is doing. And he said that he wasn't quite sure about that. And I might have to ask Ira, but he's, that's the kind of thing I'm asking Tom all the time. And he's been invaluable wisdom and invaluable experience. And I've really enjoyed the last several years with Tom. So thank you, Tom, for everything you do.
Thank you, everybody. It's been a great ride. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Can I say something, John?
Sure, absolutely.
As the secretary, I would have totally failed at this job without Tom. He is brilliant at writing minutes. Tucker, you have a very high jump to make here to get in the minutes. And I got to just thank him, Tom. You've made my job possible here. And so thank you, and it's been a pleasure.
Love it. Thank you.
Hey, could I just say one thing too, Tom? When you say Tom Stadler in the town of New Canaan, everybody reacts the exact same way. Integrity, a guy who's always smiling, and he's always there when you need him. So New Canaan thanks you from the bottom of our heart for all the things you did in the municipality. But, I think of New Canaan baseball, your origins, and then the Family Fourth. Without that, and without you, the Family Fourth just wouldn't exist. So thank you so much for everything you do for town.
Thank you. I'm not going anywhere. I'm still here.
Good.
And
Thanks, Tom.
We love you, Tom.
I just want to know how Tucker's going to manage to wait until Monday each week with all our questions to ask for Tom.
so Tom,
Well, we
Tom-
decided that the days may rotate depending on
All
the
right.
question.
Tom will also remain chairman of the Family Fourth Committee for a while, so
Good.
I
Great.
hope we have a Family Fourth next year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, getting back to, I'll give you basically the same report I gave to the Board of Finance last week. On COVID, we continue to do very well. We've had 4 cases since last Friday, ranging from 18 years old to 50. Again, they remain unrelated, not occurring in the schools. And keep in mind, we report cases based upon people that live here. So if we have people that are working here, we don't report them because they live in another town and are working in New Canaan. But we isolate people based upon contact from workers in town. We have probably over 3,000 people that come into New Canaan every day to work at our schools and our businesses. And so we're, as I said last week on the call, we are somewhat of a oasis right now with our numbers, but we're not an island, and we really have to operate to remain safe and protect ourselves. We're putting up signs this week downtown that say from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. masks are required downtown. So we really have to ramp up our protocols to remain safe with all that's going around the rest of Connecticut, around the country. So we also discussed today, we're working on a plan to have community testing beginning probably November 9th. So we'll be prepared for the college kids coming home. And we'll plan to do that through December and into January. So update you on a few of the projects we're working on. As I mentioned before, the CHP project at the wastewater treatment plant is moving forward. And we are going out to bid for the Sachs CHP. The importance of that is to generate our own electricity to save money, but also Eversource appreciates us taking the loads off their grid. And so it's good for us and good for the environment and good for saving money. And the wastewater treatment plant should be up and operating by February, and the Sachs by spring. We are adding more solar, as we've talked about. We're just going ahead with contracts for the West, and actually East School is just finishing up, having solar installed there, and we're going to do West, and Sachs roof has been completed, so we're going to do Sachs, and there's 3 town buildings that we're going to proceed to do. So that's all moving forward. We're going to stand up soon a police department building committee. We weren't ready to do it yesterday, but in 2 weeks we'll do it. And the library, as you know, is a little bit slower on track than we anticipated. Although I hope they're going to be to the Board of Finance by November. We are working on the parking issue, and let's see, Waveney House. Yesterday, the Board of Selectmen approved a contract to do phase 3 of what was the ADA compliance work on the first floor. That hopefully will begin in the next several weeks if they can get the materials and be completed by spring, early spring. The As you know, last week Aquarian declared a drought emergency and banned irrigation for the rest of the season. Although I had a call today with Aquarian, and the rain in the past few days has actually helped quite a bit, but still irrigation is banned for the rest of the season. And the budget process is starting. We'll talk about it tonight, but I've begun to work internally and with the working group of the Board of Finance to help come up with their guidance. And finally, the governor issued a new executive order yesterday on hybrid meetings, so that going forward, we're going to be able to have meetings where some people can be present in person, others can be remote, and members of the public can be, and the press can be in person and remote. There's been a number of questions. It doesn't affect us so much with the 12-member town council, but other towns that have large representative town meetings or town meetings, they've been skirting around the ways to effectively have meetings and also comply with FOIA. So that order just came down. We'll send out a memo to the various boards and commissions about how that may give you more flexibility as to how you do these virtual meetings, or people who want to stay home and be on by Zoom. So that's my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Excellent. Thank you. I wanted to ask about Waveney because I think there may be some confusion. I admit I was a little bit confused, so I had to ask Tiger for clarification. But we approved at the Board of Selectmen $785,000 this week. And I mistakenly asked, well, is that something that's going to come before the Board of Finance and the Town Council next? And I was told, no, that's the money we've already approved. So could you explain where we are in the Waveney process? How much has been approved? How much has now been committed? And how much we have left?
Well, a year ago, $1 million was appropriated for ADA compliance work at Waveney. And as the committee, Waveney Renovation Committee, got involved with, worked on the project, it was determined it had broader scope in terms of having to make the first floor more compliant than we anticipated. You have to be able to get into the first floor and make the venue available, since it's used as an event space, that make the entire premises on the first floor accessible for ADA purposes. And so we began to anticipate that would be phase 3. Phase 1 would be the bathrooms on the second floor and an elevator. We have been working for the past few weeks about the possibility of doing a different kind of elevator. And I don't know whether that's going to actually work out, but we need to proceed with the first floor ADA work, because if you can't get in the first floor, you can't get to the second floor. And so that was appropriated, and it's ADA directed. And we also have a fire escape to replace that we didn't anticipate. Fire escape stairs that come down on the side of the west side of the building.
So the way it was explained to me, the simplicity of phase 1, 2, and 3 was elevator, baths, and then ramps. And what we've done is we've taken ramps, and we've taken the ramps and fire escape and loge, and we've moved that to the front of the list, because it's,
Yes.
as you said, the first thing that has to occur if anybody is going to use the building under any circumstances. So now the ramps, loge, and fire escape are now first, and we're still working on the design for what's now phase 2 and 3, which is elevators and baths. That right?
Correct.
And we've appropriated $1 million, and the whole budget for the other 2 phases is to be determined.
Well, the second floor, we have to, we don't want to get to the point where we can't use the second floor. But the fact of the matter is, the ADA law has been on the books since 1991. They don't give you a grace period forever as a public building, and we don't want to get sued by the Justice Department. Justice Department goes around and sues people for not having ADA compliance.
No, I know. I wasn't looking to get into that. I just wanted to understand how much we've appropriated. We've only appropriated $1 million, but the rest is going to come as a discrete project with a discrete design, and that'll come before us in the next, you think, in the next few months or in the next 6 months?
Well, I'd like to bring it through the budget process as part of the bonding capital projects for the budget process.
Okay.
I do think we need to get on with it, because I don't want to end up not being able to use the second floor.
Okay,
John, can I just ask a quick question?
yes.
Have we gotten any further in determining how we're going to ascertain the best use of this building, or is that still something to be worked out? What's the plan for that?
We haven't made much progress, Liz, on that, but again, if at some point, just like we did for years with the town hall, if you can't be ADA compliant, you're not going to be able to use the building. So at least most activities occur on the first floor, other than weddings where they use and obviously our staff on the second floor. So
No, and I understand flipping phase 3 and phase 1. That makes sense, because you
Yeah.
can't use it for anything if you can't get into the building. So I think that actually was a very good.
Penny and I have talked about going to some venue experts and trying to further see how we can enhance the utilization of the building especially for events, and make it generate more revenue.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Go ahead, Maria.
Kevin, can I just ask you about the mask zone downtown? I know you've talked about it in your email, and it came up on the 4 o'clock call. And from what I understand, the governor order says if you're unable to maintain 6 feet, you have to wear a mask, or you can be ticketed and fined. The mask zone, does that sort of elevate it where it means in that zone, people are required masks at all times?
Yeah, we're going to issue an emergency order locally, because keep in mind, we're operating under a local emergency order, health emergency, as well as the state emergency, and we can be more restrictive in a community than the governor's orders. Other towns are doing that, and in our case, we didn't have the signs, and the signs just came in. We're going to put them up. We didn't think it was fair to but literally, the state wants us to begin to issue the fines for mask wearing and for large gatherings, and you can be mandated. The 7 towns currently under mandate to have training on issuing fines. I don't want to be in that category too soon, but if your numbers go up, you get on a list of towns that are mandated to be taking the training for issuing fines.
So we're officially under a local emergency.
We're going to issue an emergency order specifically on fines wearing masks downtown.
Okay, because I think there's confusion, first of all, about where this zone is. And, as a new town council member, it just seemed to me that sort of sounds like an ordinance. Is that something the town council should have taken up to make people aware and to actually
Again,
vote? 'Cause I don't know where else they're saying mandatory at all times. Like if you're walking.
Well,
along
again,
in the zone-
just like the governor has plenary emergency powers, the legislature is not doing anything in this emergency. Locally, we can do things not as broadly as the governor, but because we can't amend regulations, but we can impose protocols that are more strict than the state.
It
At
seemed.
downtown, we simply think it's not practical to maintain distances. I mean, obviously, people are sitting at outdoor dining, and you're very close to them as you walk by. But we have to. We got 24 signs going up. Tiger, I think we bought, and so Pine Street, Pine Street, Elm Street, Forest Street, Main Street are all going to have signs 9 a.m. to 9 p.m.
Kevin,
Nice bright
I have
yellow
an issue.
mask signs.
I just have a question. Isn't there an issue by setting the time 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. where people are going to misinterpret it that you don't have to have it before then? And I think it's really confusing, especially when you're discussing kids.
Well, then you revert to the governor's standard that if you can't maintain a distance, you have to have your mask on outdoors.
But why put a time?
Because again, it's going to relate to issuing fines. The state is getting very serious about issuing fines. Massachusetts has been issuing fines since the summertime, $300 fines up in Boston. People, and the good news is, I mean, we're very pleased to see the kids beginning to wear masks downtown on Wednesday afternoon. So I was out there this afternoon, and the number of masks on kids has changed considerably in the past few weeks. So, I get it. Really, we don't want to more than likely, we're headed toward a second wave. And we really have to get very serious about protecting the seniors and not having a reoccurrence of March and April.
I completely agree, but I still think that putting the time 9 to 9 is a mistake because it confuses the issue.
I think the governor's made a number of mistakes with his orders, but they're the orders. So we did what other towns and other parts of this area are doing.
Okay.
Oh, that's good.
Oh, Tiger is sharing his screen for those of you who are just seeing that graphic. And I believe it shows the placement of the mandatory mask zone, the signs, and it shows the entire zone.
Will that go in the newspaper? That seems like something that should be publicized.
We can do that.
I'll put it on the town website.
You know, there are some people in town that are encouraging us to require masks anywhere in town, and that's just not reasonable. I mean, people complain about masks not being used at Waveney Park, and you know that at least where there's plenty of space to spread out, there's no reason to require masks like that.
Okay. And is it? It can't be the entire purple section. Is it the entire purple section?
No, just the. As you lead into the downtown area, the signs will be on the side of the street.
Can I just ask, are we giving tickets at this point, once these signs are up, or are we trying not to do that?
Well, we like to encourage people to comply without giving tickets, but you know, again, we are getting serious about a few compliance things, and especially, you know, the travel advisory has $1,000 fine for not filing your form and not quarantining. So, especially with college kids coming home, we have to be very serious about these rules.
A lot of those signs are up already, and they're very bright. You really notice them. So when you're downtown, there's a couple. I've seen them right outside of our business, and they're very noticeable. And people have they've stopped and actually looked at the signs, and most folks are wearing masks when they're downtown. So I think it's a good reminder.
Okay. Anything further? Any other further questions for Kevin? Okay, there being none, let's move on to Housing Authority. We have the approval of the appointment of Judy Bentley to the New Canaan Housing Authority for a term to expire April 30, 2022, replacing Lisa Vasquez. So we have a presentation, I believe, by Housing Authority Chairman Scott Hobbs, but do I have a motion for the approval?
I'll move it.
Okay, Penny, seconded by Tom Butterworth. And now we have a discussion. Well, let's start with the presentation. Go ahead, Scott Hobbs.
Actually, don't have much to present here. Just in general, just as a quick update under Housing Authority, we've started the work over at Canaan Parish, where we partnered up with New Canaan Neighborhoods in order to redevelop that property. We've moved out approximately 10 to 12 families who have moved over to Millport. Sorry, it's actually less than that. And then we're going to move to, and first phase will take about a year. Second phase will happen right after that and do another year. So we got about 60 units coming online a year from now and 40 more units coming on a year after that. Just the need in order to go ahead and put Judy on our board is Lisa Vasquez, and served very honorably and nicely with our group for, I think, about 2.5 years. It was a great benefit, but she has actually sold her house and is sort of in transit and still around New Canaan a little bit, but can't guarantee she will be. And luckily, Judy Bentley went ahead and volunteered to go ahead and join up. She is also a member of New Canaan Neighborhoods, which controls Canaan Parish. And so it's nice in order to have a little cross-pollination there as we start to figure out the governorship of those projects to make sure they're all successful. So that's my 2 cents, and happy to answer any questions.
I think Judy is a great choice. She's just a great choice for so many reasons. She's been involved. She knows the history of this town. She cares. She's a member of Rotary Club now, so I get to see her there. It's great. What else does the Housing Authority need besides Judy Bentley?
Obviously, we have our plate full right now, with just we're still absorbing, going from the 40 units of 10 years ago to 110 units down at Millport. And that's a big change from sort of ham and egging it on barely figuring anything out to actually handling a lot of tenants and buildings and different LLCs under which all the entities are held. And then Canaan Parish is certainly absorbing a lot more time as we're getting that development moving along. And then at some other point, we'll have to go ahead and figure out what we can do next. In the meantime, we've put off a lot of deferred maintenance as we were trying to go ahead and rebuild our finances, which thanks to Canaan Parish redevelopment, we're now rebuilt and have money, not a lot of it, enough in order though to handle the redevelopment and not have to show up every other month and ask for more money from the Affordable Housing Fund.
Okay. I mean, I could ask you 50 questions, but you know, we got to move on. So if there's no other questions from anyone else? No? Okay. Thank you, Scott Hobbs. We have a motion
Thank you, guys.
on the table to approve Judy Bentley. All in favor, raise your hand. All right, John Engel, Steve Carl, Penny, you approve? Oh, there we go. Penny is approving. Christina, Thomas Butterworth, Rich, Robin, Liz, and Maria. And let me go to page 2.
Here, come here, come on.
Oh, there's Sven, Mike, yep, and Mark. Okay, so I think it's unanimous. It passes. Congratulations, Judy Bentley. And thank you for agreeing to take the job.
Thank you all. It's great.
Thank you, Scott Hobbs. Okay, next, the main event, the Board of Education. We have an update on various matters, including school operations, finances, budgets, etc. Also, I like how that's almost a footnote. Also, approval of a special appropriation of $1.543091. That's $1,543,091 for year-to-date COVID-19 pandemic related expenses. Katrina Parkhill, Brian Lutzy, and Joanne Keating. So who would like to begin?
I'll begin, John.
Excellent.
Thank you, John. And thank you, Town Council members, for your time this evening. The Board of Education is pleased to share an update on the New Canaan Public Schools COVID plans with you, as well as our special budget appropriation requests for the COVID-related expenses. First, I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge Dr. Lutzy and our administrative cabinet, who I think everyone is on the meeting with us tonight, as well as our school principals, our union leaders, our dedicated teachers, our nurses and staff members for their truly, truly incredible and tireless efforts over the past 7 months. In the face of unthinkable scenarios and challenges and countless curveballs, they have shown unflappable leadership, teamwork, and commitment to our students and our community. And our carefully and thoughtfully developed district COVID operations plan continues to serve as a foundation and guide for handling whatever may come our way. So while we momentarily pause this week to celebrate a full opening of our schools, we know that much uncertainty remains in the months ahead. And our experience to date demonstrates the district's sound and thoughtful plans can successfully support full in-person, hybrid, or remote learning. Our goal has always been and continues to be to keep our schools open to all students for as much of this year as possible if health metrics continue to be supportive. Keeping schools open is what is right and best for our students, but it is resource intensive and more costly during these times. So we appreciate the Board of Finance's approval of our appropriation request last week. And as you may recall, our budget was underspent last year by $2.1 million as a result of school closures due to COVID. This year, we've had to spend outside of our budget in order to reopen our schools and prepare for 3 models of learning: in-person, hybrid, and remote. And we procured many critical resources to prepare our buildings and reopen schools safely and in accordance with the state requirements and guidelines. So the savings realized last year covered the COVID expenditures that Dr. Lutzy and Dr. Keating will share this evening. So on behalf of the Board of Education, We hope to have your full support this evening as we continue our focus on operating our schools in this challenging environment. With that, thank you, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Lutzy.
Thank you, Katrina. And thank you, John, and members of the Town Council for inviting us here tonight to give an update and to follow up. Katrina humbly didn't take the credit for the incredible support of the Board of Education as well throughout this entire process. You know, it was over 7 months ago on March 11th that we closed our schools. 24 hours later, on March 13th, we started our remote learning. But tomorrow, for the first time since those 7+ months ago, we will have all of our students back in school, K-12. And that is a significant milestone. And that is a meaningful celebration for us, for our kids, for our families, our community. As we said, we don't know what the future is going to bring, but we know that tomorrow we'll have our doors open to every single one of our students who wants to come. And as a testament, I think, to the great work that's been going on, since we opened our schools this year, the number of students on remote learning has trended downward. We're down about 20% from where we were in the beginning. And we were one of the highest, if not the highest, in the region and state in the beginning, with a little over 6% of our students opting for remote. Now we are barely at 5% of our students. So we've had over 50 students come back in as the year has progressed, which I think is certainly a statement of the great work that's been going on and how we are taking care of our schools and our kids and our staff. You know, back in March, we think about all that we experienced in that first sort of wave, if we want to call it that. As we went right to remote learning, we learned along the way, we evolved in our practices. And as the spring wore on, we started to really think about and plan for our reopening. You know, what's going to happen in the fall? So one of the proactive steps we took was to go to the Board of Finance and speak with them about the establishment of a non-lapsing account, explaining to them the importance of having access to the funds in order to be able to swiftly and nimbly make decisions to source in the types of things that we knew schools, not only in Connecticut, but across the country, were going to be looking to source in. So we could try to get ahead of that curve to make those purchases, to get in the queue and to get our materials on time. We didn't know back those months ago what we know today about just what an investment it would take to do all of what we've done. But we were grateful for the $400,000. And we used that money to begin sourcing in the things that we needed to open on day one for our kids. I know firsthand of some districts that didn't have the ability to make those decisions in the way that we did. And some of them are still in hybrid today solely because they still haven't received their orders and materials that they need in order to finish preparing their buildings. So it's worked and it's helped us and empowered us to do the things that we have to do. Back in the spring when we closed, we created 3 overarching goals, and we thought that it really worked well for our remote learning program to remain focused on, towards those 3 goals. And it was about providing every one of our students a meaningful and relevant experience so they continue to learn and grow, to maintain the connections between our students and teachers, students and each other, students and our schools, because we know that so many of our students have pride in their identity as New Canaan Public School students, as New Canaan High School students, SAC students, East, West, South, elementary school students. That's a part of who they are. And we wanted to maintain those connections and maintain the pride that they feel. And the third was to help our students to remain healthy in all domains of their lives, academically, physically, emotionally, all of the whole child. Those goals, we created them, they served us well in the remote learning. Turns out they continue to serve us well today as we continue navigating the school community through this experience and this pandemic. Let's see. In a moment or two, we'll go through the details about the spending, but I did put together a couple of slides I'd like to show you that just sort of show what's going on in our schools, because you can hear us talk about things like plexiglass, or talk about students wearing masks, or outdoor education, or the other things that are going on. But unless you see it, it's a different thing. School is different this year. It feels different for our kids. It feels different for our teachers. We started off in this year, we implemented what we called our onboarding and re-engagement with learning plan, where we had alternating days with our kids so that they could learn the mitigation strategies. And then we implemented our hybrid plan. We did that for a couple of weeks. And then we started phasing our kids back into full-time learning. All of it was very purposefully structured so we could teach them the strategies, give them a chance to become comfortable with those, learn where we had to shore up a few things, and then start phasing our kids in. And we started phasing them in at the very youngest grades, because we know that the remote learning is toughest on the youngest learners. So for our K4 students, they've been in over 5 weeks at this point, and we've brought in the others along the way as quickly as possible, but also making sure that it was safety and health that drove all of our decisions. So after we brought in our K6, we felt comfortable accelerating that a little bit more. And so last week we brought in our 7th grade on Monday, and then we brought in our seniors on Tuesday, because just like we know the impact of the remote learning on our youngest learners, we also know our seniors, our seniors miss being in school. They miss being together. They need to develop that identity as the class of 2021. And so we wanted to show them that, this is special. They're special as well. And so we brought them in last week on Tuesday to give them the rest of that week to be the only class that's fully in at the high school. And we brought in 8th grade after that. And then this week we did 11, 10, and then tomorrow we do 9th grade. So the re-entry plan has been very thoughtful, I think very strategic, and also reflective of our values, as a Board of Ed and as a school district. And that's how we've approached all of the challenges that we faced throughout the pandemic, that we want to make sure when all is said and done and that everything clears and we're finally in the green, because now it's only yellow, orange, or red. We're finally in the green. We look back at the things we did, and we can say with pride that every decision we made was guided by our values and our beliefs as educators, as community members, as human beings. And so I'm very proud that we can do that. So if you don't mind me sharing screen for a moment, I'm going to show a couple of pictures and even a video or two, and I'll probably talk over all of it, and I apologize. For people who like captive audiences, Zoom is very dangerous. Here we go. Okay. So what I will, I'll just talk you through a little bit, some of the pictures that we have here. One of the mitigation strategies we'll be talking about in a little bit have all been developed throughout the summer. That's part of the plan that Katrina mentioned. And we know as we're watching what's happening and doing our research that they're working, right? So we have positive cases in our schools. We know that COVID's in the environment. We know there's going to be some positive cases, whether it's from a staff member or a student. So the mitigation strategies are designed to help to make sure that we don't get community spread in our schools. And there's a recent article by a Brown economist and others that say that the mitigation strategies are working. And we're not ours in particular, but all of them. And that there is the Department of Public Health continues to tell us that there's few, if any, examples of community spread in buildings. So one of the things we've done, the signs and messaging all around, right? This is, we talked about signs for downtown. We've got them all throughout our schools and customize them, again, keep the pride in the school, but the social distance markers and the signage. We've made modifications in our lunchroom and in our cafeterias. The mask wearing is perhaps the most important mitigation strategy in schools. The DPH tells us that all the time. So, but in the cafeterias, of course, that's where students are not wearing their masks. So we insourced plexiglass, and Joanne will give more details about how we did that and how we actually did that economically by fabricating it ourselves with our shop in-house. We have our masks, the compliance of the masks across the board. There was a big conversation about mask wearing over the summer, and there was a lot of angst about this. What we find day in and day out is that our students are willing to wear their masks if it means they could be together in school. They understand that one is contingent upon the other. And there's been great compliance. And when there's not, when we have to remind them a little, they respond. And so our teachers are taking mask breaks. We're going outside at times. We're doing other things. But the issue around wearing masks in schools, as we thought, really was more of an adult issue than a kid issue. Oh, here's a little more mask compliance. Okay. And you see in the classrooms, there's social distancing up above on the right. And those are some students, in school with their laptops wearing their masks. We made changes in the classrooms. We have some of the trifold partitions that are around the district that we set up with students. These tables, see that flower table there? We had to customize the partitions there, but we do it so those kids can get closer together and collaboratively learn. So there were some schools and districts that felt that the guidance was every student had to be sitting in a row, facing forward all day long. And we just weren't going to accept that. That's not how we believe. It's not how people learn well. And it's not how we want to teach our kids. We know that learning is social, learning is collaborative, learning is exploratory. And so we had to make sure we figured out a way to have our kids continue working together. So you see those partitions there. They also wear their masks, but that's because the social distancing is not being maintained. So we add that extra security there. And the way these mitigation strategies work is they're layered upon each other. So one is mask wear may be the most important one, but they're all important. And so where you can't do one for whatever reason, you try to strengthen the others. And that's the approach that we took here. Again, in the classrooms, if you've ever gone to read in one of the elementary classrooms or seen our schools at work, you know that typically we would have a carpet or a rug and the students would gather on the rug for reading and discussion and interactive read-alongs, things like that. And we can't do that now. We're not gathering on a rug. So instead we picked up these squares for the kids and we spread out in the classroom a little bit more, but we're still having the experience because again, we know that it's our role and responsibility to do the best we can within the parameters that we have to maintain the integrity of the educational experience for our kids. These are important experiences for them. So we find a way to get it done. Same thing outside. We're using the outdoors across the board in all of our classrooms, whether it's on the field over at Dunning, outside under a tree. And our teachers are creatively integrating opportunities for students to do exploratory activities and other things while they're outside. We've adjusted our security protocols and done some other things in order to, maintain this level of security everyone expects while still using the outdoors. And thanks to Kevin and the EOC, we took the hard step of having to let the community know that our buildings are closed to the community during school hours because our students are outside so much more than typical. There was a lot of conversation about music, band, and chorus. We know that singing can propel the virus droplets further than talking. We also know that playing certain instruments can do the same. So we take them outside and they play outside and they can be 12 feet apart outside. And it's much, much safer to do that. And again, I'll use one hand, but we're balancing, the program and the research and finding a way to get it done. Our hybrid learning program was actually quite successful. And while we're thrilled to have everybody back in, we're also realistic to know that if the metrics deteriorate, we may have to return to hybrid. We may have to go to fully remote as some of our schools around us have been doing recently. We keep watching the metrics and we will be responsive as we need to be. But we're prepared thanks to the hybrid learning and the professional learning that we've been doing. So in a hybrid, you've got half of your students home, half of your students in the class, and the teachers teaching both simultaneously through a live stream process. So they're using Zoom, logging in. If you look in the upper right, those are on the screen, those are the students that are home, and there's others in the classroom, and they're working together. This doesn't just work for when we're in hybrid, but it actually is how we're educating that 5% or so that are home on remote learning. And it's also where we suggest our students go if they're not feeling well. So if students have to stay home, if they're not feeling well, they can log in and keep up with the class because we didn't want them to have to choose between falling behind or going to class sick. If they don't feel well, we want them to stay home. And the same goes with the need to quarantine from time to time, the need to isolate. These are 2 weeks is a very long time. So often if you have to quarantine, it could be 10 days, it could be up to 14 days, depending upon when that close contact may have occurred. That's a long time to be out of class. So this hybrid remote learning program that we've put together allows those students to stay connected, to keep a pace with what's going on, and to remain members of the classroom. So I'm very proud of that. And it's taken an awful lot of work, and all of our teachers and staff, and Dr. Carenti has been leading the charge in this from the beginning. I think we're doing it very well. Whoa. So I apologize. These videos are of different things going on in the schools. You see the breaks at the top, the students taking some breaks. On the left, we have our TV program over at Saks, and students outside here over at Saks as well. So again, you see your students, they're wearing their masks. On the top one, they're sitting in the cube chairs that we'll talk about in a moment. Our PE classes are happening in the classroom because we're not sharing the spaces, right? So we're pushing in instead of having the students go to those spaces. And so our PE teachers go right in there and get them active and get them going. They're doing their reading together. And we also, again, are continuing our partnerships where we can with the community. So you see our students in the hallway. Now you could look and say, well, those social distance markers aren't quite working with our students. They're a little closer together than they should be. But in general, we continue to work with them and teach them. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I had an echo. And so that's our students walking through the hallway, and students again sitting in class. And you'll see in some ways school still is just like school with our kids. Now here over west, just wanted to show you the cafeteria again, the odd shaped tables that we have there, those cube chairs, and those are the chairs and the mats. And even in the classrooms, how we've set those spaces up to be safe. So it has been, and that's just a very brief snapshot, but just to get a sense of what school looks and feels like. Now, I would love to say, let's go on a tour, but we're not allowing visitors in our schools either because of the need to control density. But what we may look to do maybe at some point in the spring, we'll find a time on a Saturday morning or something where we can take a walk around, because we've said this from the very beginning. It's never been our goal to create a pale replica of what the program used to be. But knowing what the limitations and what the challenges are in front of us, we wanted to create something new and different and unique that these students in this class can be a part of, that they can remember, they can be proud of it, and be really fully engaged with. And everybody has pulled together so very well to make that happen. It's really been inspiring. And so just before I ask Joanne to go a little bit deeper into the financing piece of it, and we can certainly go, talk about whatever. I do really want to thank our Board of Education, thank our administrators. Again, the cabinet is right here on the call with us. And each one of them, the work is mission critical, right? I want to thank our faculty, Vivian Birdsall, Ronna Van Vagel, they lead the union, and they've been in lockstep with us since the close in figuring this out, making it work. And, they don't say, when we come with ideas or other things, they don't say no. Okay, what they say, let's figure this out. And we've been able to figure it out together from the beginning. It's really been inspiring. Our staff across the board, we have to, everybody's mission critical now, right? So the cleaning protocols we're going to talk about, those have to happen every night. We're disinfecting our buildings every night. And if we don't have, the staff gets sick, goes down, whatever, then those are the kinds of things that can cause building closures. A neighboring town just got in trouble. They had 10 bus drivers had to quarantine at once, and they could only find 5 subs. They had to close school for the day. They couldn't get the kids there. So everybody is mission critical. And you'll see we took some strategic steps to build some redundancy in the system to help with that where we could. Not redundancy, but capacity is probably a better word. But it's really shown how important everybody's role is, in our school system. So one of the silver linings of this year is we've had more first days this year than we've ever had. So tomorrow is another first day. We'll bring everybody back. And I hope everybody in town, from the Board of Ed to everyone in the schools, to the members of town council, everybody, can recognize and appreciate and feel good about the contributions you've all made to helping make this happen, because it really is so important. Kids should be in school, and we're doing all we can to get them there and to keep them there. And the last big thank you I want to say is to Janet Reed and our nursing staff, and to Jen in the health department. I mean, just today, there were 3 other situations that we're kind of working through, and not a positive case in the school, but students who are close contacts of positive cases, for a variety of different reasons. Each one is different when that happens, and it takes time and energy. We're calling people, we're following up with emails, and making hard decisions. But because the moment it happens, we're on the phone and we're talking, working it through, our schools have stayed open. That's what it takes. And that has been one of our goals. And again, we don't know what's going to happen in the future, but we know tomorrow. And, we know Friday too right now. So we feel really good about where we are. We're doing our best to keep our students in, but remaining flexible and nimble and, doing the best we can. And with that, I think, Dr. Keating, I'd be glad to share the financial document, if that makes sense.
Sure. All right. Well, while Brian is doing that, I'd like to say thank you again for the schools for having us here tonight to talk about our needs in response to COVID. As Brian said, we did go out in the middle of March, and for a good solid month after that, we were really working on remote learning for the prior school year. And we got through that after 4 to 5 weeks, and we immediately turned our focus and our attention to what is it going to look like if we open up in the fall. And at that time, we didn't know what it would look like, but we did understand the fact that we would have to put measures in place that would help us separate our students and keep them safe and healthy. So one of the first things we started to look at was the PPE component. And with that, we realized that at the time, back in May and June, the idea of building plexiglass or acrylic dividers wasn't even on the minds or very current in the minds of a lot of the local vendors that we deal with. So we looked to source in our own plexiglass and acrylic materials so that we could fabricate barriers within the school. We knew we had the maintenance mechanics on staff to do it. They felt that they could do it effectively. And we also had the benefit of a wood shop that has great equipment in it at the high school for the students that we were able to take advantage of. So we sourced in a significant amount of plexiglass that was available on the market, and we brought it in. We didn't start fabricating till we actually had a plan for what we were going to do with it, but we had it in stock. As the summer went on and the guidelines came out, we became clearer on what we were going to do in terms of our cafeteria tables and our classroom equipment. As Brian said, a lot of the school districts in the state of Connecticut were going into their very lowest grades, like K1 and 2, and saying, geez, we have tables for these kids. We have to go out and buy desks and chairs. And the market was not available for those types of classroom equipment. We said, we really don't want to do that, even if they were available. How can we use the equipment that we have and really modify it so that we can achieve the health standard goals, but also maintain that community for our students? And we were able to do that. The flower tables, as you were shown in the video, usually accommodate 6 students, but we were able to cull together enough tables so that we could divide them into 4s, into quarters, and still maintain and accommodate our student population that we had projected to come in the fall. So that was one measure that we took in terms of separating through plexiglass. The other was we were looking out in the market to see what type of mobile shields we could acquire. And there wasn't a lot out there at that time either, and they were ranging in a very high range. And You know, at one point, a vendor over in Danbury reached out to Dave Gussich, our principal at Saks, and said, geez, we're looking to make these folding mobile units that could be carried by students and teachers, lightweight and very reasonable and affordable. And we had samples brought in. We looked at them. Several of the administrators looked at them to see if they were viable. And they really became something that we thought would be not only good for regular ed students, but our special ed students, and also all of our teachers who need to go around the building, need to eat lunch in different areas, need to talk to students one-on-one. Our reading groups at the lower level, they're very functional and useful there. So we brought them in. We brought them in smaller allotments, and then we started to realize that this was a very good solution. So we scaled that up. In addition, you know, masks, face shields for both students and staff, gloves, hand sanitizers is also a big item here. We have sanitizing stations all throughout our schools at the entry areas and the cafeterias, near the bathrooms. And our students are encouraged, as well as our staff, to use hand sanitizer as they enter the buildings. And they have been very functional for us. So approximately 40% of that 95,766 really is for those stations and for the supplies. The rest is for masks, face shields, and gloves. And those items right there, not including the stands, but the other items will need to be replenished throughout the year. Then we started to look at the technology, and we've actually started working on in early June on this. We quickly identified that we would need to go one-to-one devices with our K-8 students, and we only had it 5-8. So we had to pull together all of our technology in the district into one central location, decide which students, which grade levels would get which models that we had, and then redistribute them out to the school. So as you can well imagine, that's over 3,000 devices that we had to collect, maintain, go through a diagnostic on them to make sure they were functioning, and actually collect them into groups and deploy them. And it took the whole summer with a good number of people to do that, but we were able to accomplish that. And we were able to satisfy all of our needs by doing a few things. We leveraged our $600,000 lease that we get every year during budget season to supplement some of the units. There was several hundred units for students that we needed and for teachers to teach remotely and in a hybrid. And then we also had to purchase things out of this fund. So so a few things here to share with you. The slides that, and I hadn't seen them before, but Brian, those were great examples of what we are doing in the classroom with technology. One of the things we realized is that we needed to amplify the voice of the teachers and the students for the kids at home. And likewise for the kids at home, the students and the teacher in the classroom needed to be able to hear them. So we had to look into devices that would help us do that for the 400 plus classrooms that we have in the district. And we brought 3 different types of devices in, and they were test run, so to speak, at the high school. Jill, Brian, several members, Matt Salvestrini, several members of our tech team, and others, principals and so forth, actually listened to them remotely to come to a solution. We had one solution that was as low as $300, and the most costly was $1,100. And the one in the middle was around $700. Interestingly enough, and much to our delight, the lowest expense one of $300 was the best solution for what we were looking to do. So that was one piece, a large piece of the technology. The second piece was providing access points throughout the school where they did not exist one-to-one in the classroom and in the outside spaces that we're using for instruction. And so this amount of money covered the high school, Saks, and to a much lesser extent, the 3 elementary schools. And so now the quality and the experience of instruction is where it needs to be in order for all students, whether remote or in school, benefit from the same experience. Digital learning software has been a big piece of this whole experience with remote learning. And there's been a number of different pieces of software. We actually had a conversation about this today. We're going to really dive into each piece and to assure that we are optimizing the use of them, but also to get clarity as to whether or not we're going to need them moving forward in future budgets. The students need to take home their devices, especially if we go to remote. They have not only their device, but they have headphones, they have charging cables. And so we brought them carrying cases to facilitate that process. As you can well imagine, we needed to purchase a good stock of power strips, extension cables, and chargers to maintain the functionality of all of the equipment. The lease paid for all of the end-use devices with the exception of $27,200 worth of Chromebooks and ProBooks, and that's about 50 units. Another important piece for us was the document cameras, being able to project for the students at home and those in the classroom, but mainly for the students at home, what the teacher was presenting to the students in the classrooms. So the document cameras have proved to be very valuable. We had to purchase some additional portable radios for outside learning. The teachers need to have communication within the school and others. Additional headphones and earbuds. And then we had some miscellaneous one-off type of technology supplies. Moving down, instructional. Brian, would you like to take the first item on that, which is the building substitute teachers?
Sure, love to. Well, knowing that we were going into a year where we would have teachers who may have to quarantine from time to time, who we're encouraging teachers to certainly stay out if they don't feel well in the same way we are with students. We wanted to make sure that we had the capacity to cover folks when they're out. So what we did was hire building substitutes to be placed in each of the buildings and a couple of the middle and high school. And they're the ones who take the first absence from a teacher. They're busy every day. But what it also does is give us this team of people who have been trained in the technology, who know how to do the live streaming, who know how to support it, so that when teachers do have to quarantine or isolate, if they feel well, they still teach from home. And that substitute teacher can go in, set everything up, make sure that it's all working, and sort of partner with the teacher that way. So again, it's another way that we're working to build the continuity in the classroom for our students. It also helps us in that substitutes have become more and more difficult to find. Generally, there's a cadre of substitute teachers who maybe had another career elsewhere, are doing it as a way to stay connected, to work with kids. And some of them are older, and many of them have opted not to substitute teach this year, given everything that's going on. So we're just like all school districts that I know of, certainly in the area, it's hard to find those day-to-day subs. But hiring them in as certified teachers as building subs where they come in each day ensures we've at least got some that we can use right off the bat. So.
Thank you. So one of the main things that happens in schools historically are students share. They share a lot of things. They share equipment, they share supplies, they just share. We don't individualize, or we haven't, at least in the past. COVID changed that. And we had to really move to individualized supplies and storage of supplies for our students. And we had to be able to move those supplies out of the classroom in the evening for cleaning purposes. So in order to do that, and in order to comply with the fire marshal's requirement or the fire laws with regards to materials, we had to buy mobile cubbies. But those mobile cubbies had to have a steel frame on them, so that they wouldn't be they wouldn't create a fire hazard in the schools. So this is primarily, this 93,000 is primarily at the elementary level for those students. At the high school level and at the middle school level, we have lockers where they can keep a lot of their supplies, but not at the elementary level. So that was a big ticket item for us there. Art, music, and some classroom supplies had to be individualized. And so you can see the numbers related to those expenses. You saw the cube chairs and the mats in the presentation, and those help us to separate our students and individualize seating for them. Our tents are located throughout the campuses in the schools and have served us well in terms of getting our kids outside. All the signage that went into keeping our students separated and safe and informed, cost $21,000. And then we had presentation stations for our art and music teachers for pushing in to the classroom. Cleaning does look different in our schools this year. And we've had a lot of conversation about this throughout the summer. And we talked a lot about the protocols that we needed to put in place to meet the guidelines. Now, mind you, the guidelines did not come out until July. So we had to start, we knew we were going to have to start disinfecting. So back in May and June, we started to bring demo equipment in so that we could test it out in terms of applying our cleaning solutions. And that was important because we didn't want to use the same rags to wipe more than one desk or one surface, because that would be transferring germs. So we did come up with a piece of equipment that has been serving us quite well. And we sourced those in under last year's budget. However, we had to come up with cleaning solutions that met the guidelines and were acceptable by the EPA. And we've been doing that. All of our other cleaning supplies, the normal supplies that we use to clean the buildings, are paid out of our operating budget. So these are purely incremental expenses that we're incurring here that you see due to our response to COVID. And looking at the guidelines and looking at what the state required us to do in terms of cleaning, we had to ramp up our cleaning not only in the evening, but during the day. So we had to take a look at our staffing model and make some decisions. And so we realized that at both Saks and the high school, in order to accomplish and be true to our commitment to the guidelines, we had to increase staffing by 1 FTE at each of those schools. So and we also had to move one of the evening custodians to a mid-shift at both of those schools, because during the day we have to clean all of our bathrooms, and we have many of them. We have 360 fixtures, toilet fixtures within the schools, all of our schools. We had to clean those not only in the evening, but once during the day. And we also have to disinfect in between lunch waves. And we also have to, once a day, go through the entire school and wipe down all hand surfaces such as railings, doorknobs, and the like. So in order to do that, like I said, we did have to make those changes at Saks and at the high school. At the elementary school, we looked at our staffing model, and we decided that given the space and the square footage and the requirements, that if we increased each person's hours by 1 hour per day, and each elementary school has 2 people during the day and 2 at night, and if we shifted their hours so that they overlapped, we had 4 people during the middle of the day to do the bathrooms and the cafeteria, that we could possibly get all the work done. And it was much less expensive than bringing in staffing for those schools. And so that's what we've been doing, and we have been successful so far. In addition to that, we hired 2 floaters, and these 2 people cover for people when they're out. And it's essential that we have backup, because it's virtually impossible to accomplish all the work that needs to be done and keeping our students safe without having resources to fill in. I would say, just to let you know, we use a disinfectant product that lasts for 24 hours. And we feel that this is very effective for us. And it's very helpful in terms of keeping the rooms safe. We use disinfectant wipes throughout the schools, cafeteria. All the teachers have disinfectant wipes in the cafeteria. And then another thing that we had to really look at and work on was our ventilation system. We know that changing out the air is very, very important. And so we maintained all of our equipment, as we always do, had everything serviced, had all of our equipment monitored and checked to make sure that it was turning over the air as frequently as it had to. And then in the areas where we have univents, where the air is not centralized, we put in fans in the windows. So that is helping us turn over the air frequently and refreshing the rooms. The downside to that, however, is in the winter, when that process is taking place, we are going to be pulling our heated air out of the buildings. So we do expect our heating bills to increase significantly at that point. One item that had come up during the middle of the year, or during the beginning of the year, I should say, is we went to split shifts for our kindergarten, double sessions. And so in midday, we had to bring busing into the district for K, and that cost us $22,851. If we end up doing this again during another part of the year, that expense will also go up. And then under other, we had to take a lot of stuff out of the classrooms. Our teachers love to collect stuff. That's a habit of the profession, is to collect stuff. And we really needed to keep the rooms as clear as possible for our cleaning protocols in the evening. So we had to get containers for all of the buildings and have the custodians pull out a lot of stuff. We put up a gate where Tiger put in the new road, which has been phenomenally successful for us. Such a help. We're so grateful for that. Over at West, we don't have drinking fountains that are acceptable. They're being installed now, so we had to buy water. And then we had some miscellaneous expenses primarily for equipment rental. Before I wrap it up, I just wanted to mention to you, as we did to the Board of Finance, that we do anticipate future needs as we go throughout the school year. And they include replenishing PPE, some instructional and cleaning supplies. We're monitoring that now. We have a system in place to do a monthly inventory of everything and do a reordering and inventory again at the end of the month so we can track usage. And so after a few months into this year, we should have a good handle on that. The heating costs, which I mentioned, perhaps costs for substitutes, that's an unknown for us. We really don't know how the year is going to go. I talked about transportation cost if we go to a hybrid, and the unknown. Last year at this time, we had no clue whatsoever that we would be going through a pandemic and what it would take to operate our schools. So we don't want to discount any unknowns that might come our way. That's it.
Thank you. Excellent presentation. Does anybody have any questions?
I do.
Go ahead, Liz.
First, I just want to say, wow, that was pretty awesome, guys. I commend you for everything you've been doing. It's, it's a moving target, building a plane while it's flying. And, I think you've thought of everything that you could think of. I have a very simple question, which is, once we get to winter, how's that going to affect the things that you're doing outdoors? The classes, the band practice, the chorus, what's going to happen? I'm sure you've thought about it. So what's going to happen in that case?
Sure. So part of it is we think students will be disincentivized from wearing shorts to school anymore. So I think that's going to help. And we can't heat those spaces, right? Because there's very tight codes on that. So we anticipate they'd be going out for shorter periods of time. We will, in all honesty, be encouraging students to wear appropriate clothing. And we'll also look at other larger spaces that we can start to build into the loop. We're not using our gyms the same ways. We're not using some of the other larger spaces. So auditoriums may be available, things like that.
Ventilation issues with those things like the gym and the auditoriums?
No, actually, we've been upgrading those over the last few years, so we're in very good shape. And there are protocols to follow about if you sing, you're singing for 20 minutes, 30 at the most, and then giving it time for the air to exchange and then singing again. So, and we're also doing things like with our middle school where they're practicing the fingering, doing other things, but actually blowing the instrument at home. If they can't go out. And our teachers, that's something we learned from the spring that they brought right forward with them. They put it on the table as a way to make all of this work and to maintain the integrity of the program.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how much of this, what kind of things end up surviving after the pandemic. Maybe some of these things will be good new practice.
Yeah, we've begun our conversations about lessons learned. We're learning so much about so many things that we think education will look a bit different and will continue to evolve and improve.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd like to make a motion.
Okay.
I'd like to move that we approve the special appropriation request for $1,543,091 for COVID expenses as requested by the school district.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second, and any further discussion on the motion? on the approval. Rich?
I just have a couple of questions for Joanne. Joanne, in the staffing that is at there, the top of the chart says this was expenses from, I think, July 1st to September 30th. So all of those expenses are just in those 3 months?
So thank you for pointing that out, Rich. The expenses for the non-salary accounts were during that period. The salary accounts are encumbered through the end of June.
Okay. Okay. So if we took the rest of the chart, that's about what, 25% of the spending that you would anticipate for the year then to get you through the next 3 quarters?
Correct.
Okay. And how are we going to work with that? Is that going to be, you're going to be coming back in on a quarterly basis
So I'm in the process right now of reforecasting out all of our accounts in preparation for the 21-22 budget. And there are going to be a few things that we just can't do out of our operating budget due to the restraints associated with COVID. So what I'd like to do is get a better handle on those numbers. And once I do, we'll be also looking at the same time on the replenishing costs, and we'll see where we stand. And then we'll come to an understanding with the town boards, our Board of Education, Finance, and the town council as to how often to come back in.
Okay, only 2 other questions, and that is, this is all incremental COVID, right? So you started with your budget, and now we've added incremental COVID. Was there any increment between it where there was either breakage or savings as a result of where those 2 come together?
So that's what I'm referring to by the reforecast. There will be some account, like conference and travel, for example, where there's going to be some funding left in there. If you take all those smaller amounts of money, they would not cover this $1.9 million. They may cover a good portion or a portion of our forward expenses, but
Okay.
not the 1.9.
And you'll figure that out as we go through the budgeting process then?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. And then the last question is I presume a lot of this is eligible for reimbursement from the federal or the state government, the CARES Act or whatever. Can you comment on how much we would anticipate getting back?
Sure. With regards to the CARES Act specific for education, we will get about $250,000. It's based on the same calculation that is used by the federal government for our Title I allocation. So, and there's 2 components to it. One is 160, the other is around 90, 95. So, and those funds are treated accounting wise, just like our other federal grant programs that we have. The other piece that we're working on with the town, and Bill Osman on the town side has a lot of experience with this, is the FEMA reimbursable expenses. And we've already put in 1 application for the 2nd quarter of this current calendar year. And we'll be putting in another one shortly for the 3rd quarter, which ended in September. They come back and forth with a lot of questions. That particular source of funding takes time. It's not immediate like the educational piece will be much more immediate.
Can you estimate what you think we'll get back out of the 1.9 million? What percentage?
Yeah, I can't right now. I really don't know. It's really the biggest key, the piece right there is the FEMA, what FEMA will give us.
Will the additional staffing be eligible for reimbursement?
I don't believe so.
Because that's the biggest thing you've got going, right?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, that's all my questions. Thanks. Very good. Beautiful, beautiful presentation.
Thank you.
So we have a motion, a second. Oh, go ahead, Maria.
Oh, you're muted.
I think you probably just mentioned this to Rich, but the areas where, I'm wondering, are we on track spending the same amount in categories like clubs and stipends and food and things like that? Is that what you're working on?
Yes, yeah. That'll be part of the reforecast.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to give our students the similar opportunities that they've had in the past for clubs and athletics and those kind of things, but there are some, barriers to that, and we're working through the details.
Well, sports too, I would think, right? I mean, athletics, unfortunately.
Yes.
And then the building subs, that amount is for 9 subs, is it? 9?
Yes.
Okay.
Again, those are certified teachers, right? So they're certified special ed teachers or certified teachers in each of those levels, knowing that they may be stepping into classes for a couple of weeks at a time. So we wanted to be prepared.
Do you ever have to get more subs beyond the 9? I imagine. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, when you think we've got over 420 staff, you know,
Mhm.
it's on any given day. But what we're able to do is use these strategically. So if somebody's just out for a day, they can just have, you know, a daily sub come in. But if we know somebody's quarantining, then we want to use a building sub to keep the continuity over a period of time.
Is there a rule about long-term subs? Like, do you have to do a contract versus a long-term rate versus a regular?
If they're in the same classroom for a certain period of time,
Mhm.
it triggers certain things. So after 40 days, there's a certification requirement, and it does go back into you know, contractual costs, and it's retroactive, things like that.
Okay.
Okay, if there are no further questions, Mark.
Yeah, thanks. Just a statement. First, Dr. Alessi, I hope your arm is okay. It looks like you may have injured yourself.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, this it's not. I'm not going for a look here. Yeah.
Yeah. It's tough to take those headphones off with one hand. But no, I with 2 kids in the school system, you know, I have firsthand experience of the work that you and your staff are undertaking, and my gut tells me you're probably a bit tired and at times overworked, but you know, I just want to say your dedication deserves my highest admiration. So I just say keep up the great work.
Thank you. We're fortunate. We've got a world-class team here in New Canaan doing an amazing job. Thank you.
All right, if there's no further questions, I guess we should vote. So all in favor, raise your hand. I see John, Steve, Penny, Christina, Tom, Rich, Robin, Liz, Maria, Mark, Mike, and who am I missing? We gotta go to page 2.
Sven.
Sven. Hi, Sven. Okay. So, hey, Sven, you got to get on page 1. So that's 12. It passes unanimously. So the motion is passed and the budget is approved. Thank you, everybody. I did tell Katrina and Dr. Lutzy several months ago that the town council does not want to get in the way and add extra stress and extra anxiety in this process. We want to be a good partner. And we said, we think you guys are doing a phenomenal job, one of the best in the country. You're certainly leading in the state of Connecticut. And we wanted to give you every assurance that we were behind you 100%. So I'm very happy that we have a unanimous vote behind your budget and your efforts. And I think you guys are doing a tremendous job, and we want to continue to be your good partner. Thank you.
Thank you, John. And thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Okay, with that, we move on to the transfer station project. A little bit less money, a little bit less sexy, but important nonetheless. Tiger Man, take it away.
Thank you, John. Thanks for having us. So we wanted to give you an update as to basically a change for what we're envisioning for the scale house at the transfer station. Originally, there was a budgeted item for $50,000 for renovation of the incinerator building, the one that was decommissioned about 20 years ago. And we were going to utilize that area for a break room, or it's actually already utilized as a break room for our men, bathrooms, lockers, things of that nature. And we wanted to renovate that to just kind of bring it up to current standards. As we got further into the project and further looking at it, the environmental aspect, given the fact that it was an existing or previous incinerator building, the monies or costs started to mount to the point where we took a step back, looked at the entire project and the goals of the project, and the needs of the transfer station operation itself, and decided that the best course of action would be to replace the scale house with a larger facility or larger structure, a prefabricated one, whereby we can house not only the scale house operations, but a break room, locker room, restrooms for our staff, restrooms for the public, since we don't have any restrooms up there for them, and an office for our superintendent. At present, our superintendent, his office is down the hill, the wastewater treatment facility. So in order for him to supervise his men, he's got to get into a truck and drive up the hill several times a day and then go back down to his office. We felt it was best to house everything all in one location. We then came to the point of how are we going to finance the change, since it was a little bit more money. So we took a look at all of our previous projects and any leftover funds in those projects. There's about 10 projects in total. We went to the Board of Finance and asked them to sweep all the funds into one project for this installation. So we'll be taking out the existing scale house. If we can find a use for it, we will. We've had ideas as far as possibly for an animal care facility. It is an actual guard shack. So we thought that we might be able to utilize it in other locations, either at the leaf mold site, maybe high school's looking at present to maybe put an additional guard shack there. We might be able to utilize it there. So we move that aside, save it, and then put in a new facility exactly where the existing scale house is now, only a little bit larger. I don't know if you have questions. I have a sketch of it if you'd like to see it.
Oh, yes.
If you give me the screen, I can.
I think you're the co-host, so you can.
Okay. Well, yeah, I think you took it away before. Yeah.
Oh, you're co-host now, Tiger.
All right. Thank you. So looking at, find the piece for you. So the actual layout of the new structure would be this. Right here is where the scale is itself. So we'd have an office for the scale house operator. Our superintendent would be directly behind it. Lunchroom, locker rooms, public restrooms, restrooms for our staff. And this is the entrance to come in to talk to the office from the back where this transfer station is down here. And then entrance for the public restrooms itself. To give you an idea of the existing facility that we were looking at, originally trying to renovate, here is the old incinerator. Right now it houses our salt, and you'll see composting piles in front. We were looking at going into the existing office, which is to the side. This bin is for our electronics recycling. This is actually signs for the police department, as far as for our signs maintenance individual. We walk into the facility and you take a look, and this is the current state of the break room for our men. This is the area that we were looking to renovate. But we decided that the best location for ourselves is to come back up and remove this existing scale house and place the new facility right in its place, just a larger footprint overall. So I don't know if there's any other questions you might have on the project itself. The overall cost, $194,000. We took $144,000 of transfers, added it to the $50,000 that we had. So we have about $170,000 worth of work slated out, including contingency at present.
So it occurs to me, and I don't want to design it on the fly, but the most important thing about the picture we're seeing now is that there's a way for the public to come up and interact with there's a guy operating the scale. He can look out the window and see what's going on, and he can see people coming, and he can interact with the public. And it looks to me like you've got the windows where they can see the scales, but it sounds like the public has to go inside.
The public, this is a service window itself. So we can service through the window at present. And sometimes, yes, people have to come in through the outside. We're trying to keep everything to the outside. We've been talking to the scale manufacturer to see if we can't get actual payment area that's on a bollard that's right next to the scale, so that as you drive up, sort of similar to a car wash, you would actually have a kiosk, weatherproof kiosk, where the cost would come up on the screen. You could swipe your credit card, pay, and then we could email you a receipt to try to avoid any time coming into the window or coming into the office to do any work inside the office with our staff, to try to separate, specifically during COVID. We are doing all of our permitting online, or the majority of our permitting online right now. Some people don't have internet access or are not computer savvy, so we have had to do some in person, but the majority of it has been handled outside. We have a little under 2,800 permits given out so far this year. We are trying to make it as user-friendly as possible and try to reduce the amount of time spent in and around the scale house and try to get people in and out in a timely manner.
Tiger.
Sure.
Observation. We live in a totally different world, and we have to look at things going forward. And there's no female bathroom. And I don't think that going forward you will have an old man facility. So I think you should accommodate it in the plan now and avoid an addition later on.
The worst case scenario is I'd take the public bathroom away and allow a female restroom.
Okay.
if I had
So
to.
if you want to do that.
No, but thank you. We tried to make the structure as small as possible. This is a double wide trailer itself. It's 40 feet wide by about 20 feet, 20 feet wide by about 40 feet long. So it's basically a double wide trailer that they'll manufacture off site and then meld together when they get here.
Okay.
Does it need to sit on concrete? Is there a slab or?
There'll be a slab. It has to sit on a certain number of pillars. There'll be a slab and a retaining wall around it. Yes, and the access for all the utilities, cabling and what have you is underneath the facility.
And is that included in the amount?
It's included in our overall cost estimate. That's correct.
And Tiger, is there going to be downtime where when the old building is removed and this one comes in, that things are going to be inaccessible, or?
No, we plan on picking up the old structure and moving it to the side of the island that it sits on now. Basically a little bit to the west and south, placing it there. And then that'll give us ample room to do the work that we need to do to install the new structure, so that it will still be up and running. We won't have to relocate the scale house operator.
Are you planning to have this building be solar?
To be solar,
Yeah.
I could put solar panels on it. The footprint is not that large. I don't know what the payback would be on it.
Is it a flat roof or is it a pitch roof?
Flat roof, yeah. So we could look at it and see exactly what the payback would be to put panels on the 400 square feet or 800 square feet of area.
Okay.
I'll ask our consultant for that. It's a nice idea.
Hey, Tiger, it's Sven. Are you sure in the building spec that you want to go without the dehumidifiers on the HVAC?
We've gone back and forth on that, and I'll be speaking to Bill again about that.
Is it in your contingency?
We have enough money in the contingency if we wanted to add that. Yes.
Cool, thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Tiger, what else did you consider doing with $145,000 that the Board of Finance found extra, or that you found extra, and decided to do this?
It was in essence the majority. The monies would have been rolled back in the end. Project finishes, the project closes, and the monies would have been rolled back after their 2-year time frame. So they would have rolled back into the general fund. I didn't have a better idea.
So you didn't consider anything else like expanding the sidewalk program or anything else that would
we're always looking at many different things to do, but given the fact that I have a superintendent that is half a mile away from his staff down a hill where he has to drive to go see him, and we interact with the public on a daily basis here, and there are situations whereby there are disagreements. I like to have my superintendent up at the facility. I'd like to be able to have my men treated humanely, and the current conditions of where they were was not, in my opinion. And I think this was originally cut out from the original scope of the project back 20 years ago, 1998, 2000. It was redlined out of the project. I think it's a necessary addition or a necessary portion of the work.
What's the intent that you're going to do with the incinerator house if we're not going to if we're not going to upgrade it to something else?
That's just there was just an office area there. I'd like to tear that thing down or repurpose the salt area for a swap shop and actually build a salt barn that suitable salt barn where we can house enough material and we can actually dump the salt inside the container. I think we're the only town in the state that doesn't have a suitable salt facility. We're using what used to be the tipping floor from the previous incinerator to house our salt.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do we need a motion?
No, because this is just a update. Is that
Hey,
correct?
John, can I ask Tiger one or two things? It's Steve.
Absolutely.
Hey, Tiger, Steve. Obviously, the guys that are working over there, you mentioned that they are working in substandard conditions. We've all seen it. It's pretty nasty. The only thing I would say is that, as a taxpayer, we want to make sure that we are servicing our customers as good as possible. And, when you see the office and you mentioned the window, I want to make sure the windows are big enough, they're welcoming. And the biggest thing about over there is the signage. People come, maybe they come for the first time or the second time. They don't really necessarily, it's not a natural for them where they're going. So, if you could, increase the signage in any way, just to let people know what to do, where to go. That's important because I do hear that once in a while.
Okay, that's I haven't heard that in the past, but we can certainly look at directional signage. We've tried to stripe certain lines on the pavement to say, I heard Donnie today, follow the yellow line. It'll take you right down the construction and demolition area, the CD and brush pile. They just have to follow the yellow line to get down to the exact location where they go. But we can certainly try to help them directionally come in. The majority of our customers, they're there daily, right? So, but for the odd visitor,
for the homeowner,
for the homeowner coming in, it is a little daunting. I would agree with you. You come in, you say, okay, where do I start, right? How do I start my endeavor, through the transfer station? So I think that's a great comment.
Thanks.
Tiger,
Thank you.
to follow up on Steve's comment, I would go as far as to recommend putting an awning over the window. Because it can be serviced throughout the year, rain or shine or snow.
That's a great idea. I appreciate that. We were looking at doing one on the existing structure, so we'll look at this one as well. Especially considering in COVID, we were trying to keep people, behind the glass, so to speak, so that there wasn't that much, there's interaction, but it's through the glass. So at that point in the rain, it was quite difficult. So we could certainly take a look at that.
Would you put the service window maybe on the side? I mean, not to get too picky, but I'm just thinking if people are standing between you and the weighing station, it just seems like it'd be more convenient if they're parking on the one side, they don't have to walk around the whole side of the building. They just go to the short end.
There is a window here as well. We have windows here and here, entry door here, and then the parking lot is actually back behind the station itself.
Right.
But we can certainly look to try to expand these windows. There will be the plan is to have a sidewalk all the way around, so 2 service windows would help.
But
sorry, Christina, you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Yes.
Okay, so the parking area is up higher than the building, correct?
Yes. Yeah, we're working on access issues as far as ADA accessibility through the back.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, you're right. Because right now there's steps leading down to the facility.
Correct.
So there is some grading that we'll have to do in order to make sure that it's ADA accessible.
Either that or provide parking below at the same level as the building.
Correct. This side here, is set up for 3 lanes of flow. It makes it a little bit more difficult on this side of the structure, but we'll look, we were looking to this side to try to maintain accessibility for the disabled.
Or you can do it with the triangles are on the right-hand side.
Here, yes.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, just to clarify, it's an update because we're not making a motion to approve it. No approval is necessary. This is money that you've already gotten approved in your budget. And so this is just an update, a courtesy update to the town council.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we wanted to make sure you understood what was happening and what we were planning since we had made a change.
Okay. Any further questions? If there are none, I'm going to stop the sharing. Thank you, Tiger.
Thank you. I appreciate the feedback.
Thanks. And next, I guess we'll move to tax supported capital projects, Lunda.
Okay.
And this is an approval, right? We have to take a motion and approve.
Yes, this is an approval. So this is in accordance with the town charter. These projects were approved 2 years ago and funded through tax support. Their 2-year time frame to complete has expired, and as per town charter, in order for them to be extended, we need to bring these to you for approval by way of special appropriation. They were approved by the Board of Finance. Town charter requires that any special appropriation be published for 2 successive weeks. We did this I think last week and this week, together with the Board of Education, 1.5 million that you just approved by way of special appropriation. So these were published together. So we've met that requirement of the charter. And once you approve this special appropriation, basically it allows the clock to start ticking again and an additional 2 years for these projects to be completed. The majority of these projects do not require 2 years. It's just timing. Some of these are going to be completed between now and the end of the year. Some of these already have encumbrances. Projects are in motion, but this just allows us to spend the money past June 30th by way of special appropriation. And again, the funds have already been appropriated. They exist in the project budgets. And so we're not taxing any more to fund these projects. And so we bring this to you for approval of the motion if you approve, and the projects will continue.
Any questions before we go to a motion, or Sven, if you want to make a motion, go ahead.
I was just going to make the motion, John.
Go ahead.
Motion to approve.
Okay, second.
A second.
Steve Carl. Any further discussion?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Is it usually customary to do a 2-year extension?
The way that the charter is written by special appropriation, it is a 2-year, but at the conclusion of each year, because the appropriation is done annually, the Board of Finance does approve the funds rolling over into that following year. Because the tax supported capital fund is a non-lapsing fund, and so once the dollars are appropriated, the projects are spent through there. But you have done 2 years periods. But they do come before the Board of Finance at the conclusion of each year before they can roll over. They don't automatically roll over without the Board of Finance approving the rollover.
Okay, thank you.
John?
Go ahead, Rich.
Linda, the question I got is, do I understand this properly? So these will have been approved for 4 years by the time when we approve this. It will be the first 2 they were approved for, and they weren't spent, and therefore they're for another, so it'll be 4 years. If that's right, could you just describe how was it assessed that these needed to be continued to be rolled over? And I think that Christina's question is a good one. Why not 1 year? Why not 6 months? I mean, to have an open checkbook for 4 years on these projects is pretty amazing to me. And when you look at the items, they look a lot like the capital of this year's approval. You know, I mean, bulletproof vests and, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know why we don't spend this stuff when we get it approved, and how we assess that we should keep it open for 4 years.
Well, Tiger's on the call, and maybe Tiger, you could pick any one of the projects on here and speak to those. I know some of these don't necessarily require another 2 years. They're already in progress. Some of these projects are seasonal. Some of these projects can only be done in the summer or in the spring. And that's the timing of the projects. And therefore that just allows them to be completed following the regular pattern of projects. And maybe Tiger, you could expound.
I don't know if you have a question on any specific ones.
No, it's more of a process. It's more of a process question because, as we came up with money for the house that we just talked about, I mean, how much money could we actually squeeze out of these appropriations that are open and will perhaps never be spent? And why don't we do it now versus wait 2 years? Or did we do it? Maybe that was the analysis that was done. I'm just trying to understand how we decided to continue to have an open purchase rec for 4 years.
Well, right. If what we presented to the Board of Finance last week, there were three buckets of projects. There were projects that were in their initial 2 years and were rolling over into their second. We did also have a list of projects that were completed within the 2 years. Those were closed out and any unspent funds were rolled back into the fund balance. And we went through a similar exercise back in, I think in May, where we just did a review of projects that were completed, they were done. We were able to return to the fund balance about, I think, $200,000 worth of unspent capital. And what we did then was the tax supported capital that was approved for last fiscal year, we were able to reduce that transfer amount by using dollars of projects that weren't spent. And so this is, after reviewing all of those projects, closing some that were done, these were the projects that the department said were requesting to continue. So we did have a good number of projects, almost $300,000 worth, if you compare last year's list and this fiscal year's list of projects that were actually returned to the general fund.
Okay, and so that says, if I look at this list, it's about 30 things long. So there's about 30 things that require 2 more years to get done before we can get the money back.
Not all of them, Rich. Some of these are actually transfers of these are actually what we utilized to transfer for the building. Yeah. So some of them they had, they got to be carried over and then they're transferred, right? So it's kind of a
correct.
So they got to. So the $144,000 at least of mine, in here, it's actually going to the building, right? So they're not in here, and other ones, bridge construction for whatever reason takes a long time. It takes a long time to close, right? So one of the reasons why they looks like they languish, but it's not a question of languishing. It's just a question of it takes a long time to start them and it takes a long time to finish them. So that, certain things like that.
I guess my question is, in your opinion, Tiger, and in your opinion, Lunda, the process that we're running here is not leaving unused funds around. We're looking at it often enough to make sure we're current when we can free money up to do something else, or when it needs to be rolled over because we're not, we're building a bridge and it takes 5 years. That's pretty simple. I just want to understand if you guys are comfortable the process is working, because that's what our job is, right?
Yeah, we've had several instances where we've swept monies, midstream out into other projects so that they wouldn't have to be specially appropriated, or if they were, needed additional funds. We've done that several times over the past couple of years, where we've taken projects that are done and swept the monies away to other needy projects. So they are reviewed pretty much quarterly, I would say.
Correct. We do about a quarterly review of this, and as I mentioned, I think in May we identified almost $200,000 worth of projects were completed that we closed out. We swept the funds and we applied those to the general fund balance.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Is it possible with some of these school projects? I noticed the school people aren't on the call anymore, but because of COVID, that certain things just came to a screeching halt?
Yes, some of it was related to COVID. And it shortened the construction season. For example, the spring work, a lot of the spring work wasn't able to get done, and therefore it has to wait until next spring in order to get done. But these projects were reviewed. I sent a full list of projects to the Board of Ed. They identified some for closure, and these were the projects that they requested that are already in progress. They've committed, vendors are committed to these projects. They've started work on it. We've encumbered the funds, and it's just a matter of the projects being completed and the vendors getting paid. So they are in motion.
Why would there be one from 2012 and 2013? Fire regional mobile data. And
They actually have a study going on for those.
Right.
It's a regional study that they're wrapping up. Jack spoke about that at the Board of Finance meeting, specifically on that 2012 regional mobile data. Once they finish the study, then they'll be able to move forward.
Hey, Tiger, this is a question for your department. Just generally speaking, hearing a lot of labor shortages and material inflation in your world, just, generally speaking, or can you validate that, or you expect that going forward?
We do expect it going forward. Yeah, the contractors that we've been dealing with, they were able to maintain the majority of their staff, but we are seeing some problems with materials, material procurement, things of that nature, where there are some delays, and contractors are asking for additional time. We haven't seen additional monies requested yet, but additional time specifically. The majority of our bids that we put out this year have been very tight, very competitive, and consistent, I would say, from pre-COVID times to COVID times. So we haven't seen necessarily a bump in that, which is a good thing. Going forward, I can't speak for that yet, but we will be looking at that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Tiger, I have a question. It says 2019 Waveney Park dredging. Didn't that already get done, and wasn't that concluded?
Yeah, let me find that. Yes, there are, well, you're looking at some of these, the numbers are as of June 30. So there might've been some payments that were lagging. So it's one of the reasons why it's being carried over, because it is completed, and that 34-1 is necessary as a payment.
So I'll use this as an example, but if you have, say the actual balance number was $12,782, and the request is for a 2-year extension, that really allows the money to be moved if they're no longer needed and the project is completed to something else, correct?
It could be, yes, but it would have to be moved. It'd have to be approved by the Board of Finance.
And Town Council, or just the Board of Finance?
That'd be a question for Linda.
No, for a budget transfer between projects, it would be Board of Finance if it's going into an existing project. But if the scope of project is changing, like what you saw, we just saw the presentation, then it would come to you.
So I would like to propose that going forward, that we separate the projects and those that are about to wrap up, that we don't issue a 2-year extension, because I would like to see those funds go back to the general budget and then appropriate money for another project as it goes through the process. But I just don't want it to be that there's a slush fund being built up to do projects that bypass the Town Council.
The intent is never to develop a slush fund. And that 34-1, that's the town side of that expenditure, that was fully expended. So while it might need to be carried over, it's fully expended.
On your Waveney Park dredging as an example?
The Waveney Park dredging, yeah, that there's 34,100 stated available as of June 30. That's that project's, the portion of the town funds has been fully expended.
Okay, so why is it on the list to be extended for another 2 years? That's what I don't understand then.
Got it, because as of June 30, it wasn't expended, but as of now it is. So,
Right. So that's what I was saying earlier, that the charter extends them for 2 years, but a lot of these projects don't need 2 years. And because this was a 2-year project, the authority to spend ended June 30th. And if we're going to spend, like in this particular case, the project maybe concludes in August or September, or possibly November, there is no authority to spend beyond June 30th. So why these are coming to you? So these are June 30th balances, but they're already commitments, and they're projects, they're vendors that have completed the project waiting to get paid, but the authorization to pay them doesn't exist because the project's authorization expired June 30th. So once we roll these over, we make the payments, and these projects, like I said, not all of these projects need 2 years. It's just that the way that the charter is written, the appropriations are on a 2-year cycle, renewable after a year.
Linda, if we don't approve this, then those vendors won't be paid.
Correct.
Okay.
Linda, can I try and just clarify one thing? I believe the transfers have to come to us, to the town council, if they are going across appropriations. But if it's within the same appropriation, the Board of Finance can do it. And if it is within a project, you can do it. I believe there's a clipping level at this. Is that right? I believe that if it's across appropriations, it has to come to us, which is the point of the 10 or 12 appropriations we approve.
Right. There's a dollar threshold. Transfers below $5,000, the finance department can do, but I have to notify the Board of Finance that we made these transfers and the list of transfers. Transfers above 5,000, the Board of Finance has to authorize those transfers to happen. So even transfers that are done internally, they still have to go before the Board of Finance just as notification that these are the transfers that were done.
Okay, but there is a level of transfer that has to come to us, isn't there? I believe. I could be wrong.
I don't know. I don't believe so. I believe transfers, as long as they're within the appropriations, and with the Board of Finance, because the projects themselves come to you for approval, and therefore you've already set the appropriation amount beforehand, and therefore if they're not exceeding that initial appropriation, they don't come back to you.
Yeah, okay. I'm parsing appropriations, because within appropriations, there's a bunch of projects, right? We generally approve 10 or 12 appropriations, of which, Tiger stuff, but most of it is within 1 or 2 appropriations, and buildings as an appropriation. And I was under the impression that if it stayed within buildings, that the Board of Finance could approve it. But if it went from buildings to something else, like the finance department.
Right. So we're talking two things. I follow you now. You're talking about bonding appropriations, which are different than these tax-supported appropriations.
Okay. Okay. You're probably right.
For the tax-supported projects, you approve them per project. For bonding projects is where you approve per grouping of projects that funds can be transferred within the projects. So for these projects that are tax-supported, you set the limit at the project level. For bonding is at the grouping level.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second, we've had our discussion, no further discussion. All in favor, raise your hand. I see John, Steve, Christina, Tom, Rich, Robin, that's 6, Maria makes 7, Sven is 8, Penny is 9, Mark is 10. Tucker's raising her hand, but I'm not gonna count her. Mike is 11 and Liz is 12.
I was counting on my fingers.
I have to do it too. I'm secretly got my fingers going below the deck. All right, it's unanimous, 12 zip. Thank you, everybody. The motion's approved.
Thank you.
Does everybody want Linda to just keep going with financial update, or do you want to talk about the budget finance committee first? You want to?
Let's do the financial update first. Let's just keep going with Linda.
Agreed. Go, man, go.
Okay, so there's not much excitement on the financial update. You've seen the year-end financials. I believe I presented these to you last year. We are finalizing the audit, and so the information that you have is unaudited financials, but we don't have a significant number of adjustments, so the numbers are going to resemble these. So all in all, in the general fund, at the conclusion of FY20, we will have added about a little over $1 million to the fund balance, largely driven by obviously revenues exceeding expenditures. But as you just heard from the Board of Ed presentation, as a result of closures related to COVID, the Board of Ed did come considerably under the appropriation, and that is the large driver of the expense savings on in the general fund. And then revenues, as we typically see in years, the collection rate at 98.5%, we were in excess of 99.3, 99.4%. So that was good. Our investment income also exceeded budgets that year. And our conveyance fees also exceeded budgets the prior year. That made up for shortfalls in parking revenues, which I think we came in almost 50% of budget, actually less than 50% of budget, because we waived parking during the pandemic for March, April, May, and June is when the renewals are due. So those excesses in taxes and conveyance fees made up for the shortfalls in parking and other areas. And then the savings on the Board of Ed side and some other town departments, we ended up with a net increase to the fund balance of $1 million, which will allow us to fund the $1.5 million that you just approved in this fiscal year for the Board of Ed COVID expenses. But we do plan to have, the audit is on schedule, and I think we're going to have preliminary numbers in November, but we will present to you the final audit numbers by your December meeting when you approve the audit and the CAFR. Year-to-date financials are trending well. I shared with you property tax collections. They have really not been impacted by the 90-day delay. We're at 52, 53% of property tax collections, which is consistent with where we are typically this time of year. On the expenditure side, we are about 20% expended. There are no really, nothing alarming on the spending side. We did talk about the parking permits. Those revenues cross fiscal years. So we had a dip in the May collections, but we also, in the June collections, but we also have a dip in July and August because that's typically when we get that revenue. So we anticipate again seeing a reduced parking revenues this fiscal year as well because of that forgiveness of the parking. But other than that, I've shared with you this year's conveyance fees are doing extremely well. As of September, conveyance fees, we had budgeted $1 million for the year. As of September, we were already at $781,000, almost 3/4 of that revenue within the first quarter of the year. And so we're watching that closely to see how it trends. Back tax collections, also, we had budgeted $250,000. Year to date, we're past that. We're at $321,000. So all in all, on the revenue pictures, we're doing well on revenues, and expenses are trending as we would anticipate. We do, however, this fiscal year have, as of the first quarter, we have a little over $200,000 in COVID expenses on the town side. We anticipate we're submitting these for reimbursement. So we do anticipate a significant portion of these that are eligible to be fully reimbursed, either through FEMA or through the CARES Act. And then also expenses that we incurred last fiscal year for COVID, those revenues, once those get reimbursed, those will hit the books in this fiscal year. So we will have unbudgeted revenues from COVID reimbursements this fiscal year, which will offset the expenses in this fiscal year. And that's really all I have by way of an update for the first quarter of fiscal year 21. But all in all, things are trending well. There's really nothing, I see nothing of concern at this point.
I have a question about how you treat special appropriations. So one person mentioned to me this week, well, if we add to the Board of Education budget through a special appropriation, is that calculated as part of their budget? Do you recalculate and say, well, they're up by a greater percentage, or they're up by a smaller percentage as a result, or does this remain a special and exception?
It remains separate. What the Board of Finance did last year was we created a non-lapsing fund for COVID, and therefore COVID expenses and COVID revenues are not expensed out of their regular budget. So you will see the line when we transfer out as an expense line, but we separate it out from the Board of Ed budget. And so when you're doing year-to-year comparisons, the Board of Ed regular expenses are separated from these one-time COVID expenses.
Okay, great. That's
So
clear.
the entire 1.9 will be sort of separated out.
Yes,
we
the
go
entire
forward.
yes, it will show up as a transfer from the general fund into the non-lapsing fund, but it will be separated out from their regular Board of Ed expenses.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I don't see any further questions. Thank you, Linda. So I guess we'll move right into your budget discussion, Rich.
Okay, thank you. This is a very exciting part of the meeting, I know, so struggle to stay awake. The point of this discussion is the Board of Finance, starting 2 or 3 years ago, started putting out a budget letter, which told both the town and the Board of Ed what their expectations was when they came in. In my opinion, this is one of the most important things that ever happened. It's had a huge impact on how the budgets are put together and people understanding the budgets and knowing what to shoot for. And through the first several years here, they've kind of done it on their own. This year, one of the things they did is they've come back to all of the town bodies here, ourselves, Kevin, and the Board of Ed, and said, look, we'd like to hear from you guys before we go out with our goals in the letter. And we're going to go out with them in November. So if you would write down what you would like in the letter and what you would like us to focus on, that would be helpful to us. Not saying we'll do it. I'm just saying they're saying, that would be helpful. So we did have a finance committee meeting about 2 weeks ago. I've circulated the minutes to this group a couple times, and we talked about 8 or 9 different things. The point tonight, I think, is, and I think it's important that we just have these discussions, because the guys and gals in the Board of Finance watch this, and they will understand, even if we don't pass any motions or anything else, what are we thinking about and what is important to us. And I will tell you, out of the subcommittee meeting, I sent you a note, I think it was yesterday morning, that had 2 points on it, and it really is 3 points that I think the Board of Finance was if you boiled everything down, let's not have too many things to talk about. Let's just talk about a couple things. And the first point was that one possibility is we start to set the budgets based on as a benchmark, anyways, the inflation rate. Should the spending relate to the inflation rate? Not saying it has to be equal to it, but would that be a benchmark that you could start with to go out with targets? So that's one concept. The second concept is 1 year really adequate to understand the spending, or should it be done in a broader sweep of years? And the sweep that's been suggested by the Board of Finance and by us has been the 2 historic years added to the current year as one sweep, and then the current year in the context of the next 2 years projected with very reasonable and logical assumptions, and see whether that year that you're working with fits in that sweep well and gets us to where we want to be, which I think is, I think we want to have an efficient and an effective spending in the town. I think we want to be able to afford it, and I think setting as a benchmark against what that is inflation. And so therefore, as we go through setting the budget, going back to inflation and saying, look, I'll tell you what, we're going to spend more than inflation this year, and we're going to do that because of school transportation. We're going to get kids to school later, and it's going to cost us $1 million. So that's on top of the inflation, so we can explain to the citizens this is why we are above inflation. Last 2 years, we've been under it. Just as an example, last 2 years, we've been under it. And in this, we are very close to just trending on the inflation rate. As we look forward, since we've been trending on the inflation rate for the last 3 years, when we look forward in the next 2 years, we think we got a problem. And this is exactly what Michael Chen brought up last year, is he said, we had this big one-time benefit in 2020. Now, next year, we're going to have a growth rate in our spending of 6 or 7%. There's nothing you can do about it because of the health thing. That's something that you catch in these, if you start looking forward and saying, what's going to happen? And is there something we should do in the current year to anticipate that? And that's the point of the 2 years back and 2 years forward. So inflation is a benchmark, and a longer time frame to be able to assess it is the second concept. The last thing is let's understand the capital plan in the same time frame. So how much capital we spent for the last 2 years? What are we going to spend this year? And what do we think we're going to spend in the next 2 years? And let's do that on what we really think is going to happen. As opposed to today, we have a budget that is given to us. We don't approve it. And it says it's not really a budget. It's just what the state requires. And so I would just as soon have something that was meaningful and demonstrated that our capital spending is intended to stay within the bond guidelines that the Board of Finance has set up. If we don't like the guidelines, we have to change them. If we understand it in that, we know where we're going. So these two items, I think, would be good rails to keep us on track as we put the budget together. So that's why I wrote that in the letter. That's what the three things are that I think that's decent direction to give the Board of Finance that they could incorporate into their letters. And I'd just like to open it up for any discussion, anything in the notes, anything anywhere. But what would you like to tell the Board of Finance that you would like to come back when you're assessing the budget?
Sven? Go ahead, Sven.
So wise one. I definitely agree with you with respect to our capital projects. I also appreciate you bringing up the fact that we had the 1 year very favorable addition to our budget. I read the notes, from your meeting. I agree wholeheartedly that we have a lot of money in reserves, and I think that represents overtaxation. But the other question I have is then, you're talking about looking at a 2-year capital. We have a 5-year capital plan. Are you saying that you don't think that it's worth that 5-year capital plan is just a wish list and has no bearing on what our actual 2-year programs are going to look like?
I don't know. I don't know really what it is. Every time something that people bring something up to put in the capital plan, it's always been in the capital plan for 5 years. It's not a plan that matters to us because we don't get to approve it. We get to look at it, right? And there's generally significant things that are not contained in the capital plan, and things. It is not a plan with integrity to me. So I would like to get one with integrity that matches the guidelines that the Board of Finance puts up, and can let the citizens understand what we're actually planning on doing.
Thank you.
Rich?
John, can I make a comment about that? The charter the charter requires that the departments estimate what their capital needs are for the next 5 years. It's something that we don't, so we're doing it because the charter requires it. And it tends to be taken, what's the worst case that can happen? I mean, if you expect a boiler to be, aged out in 3 years or roofs. So it definitely is always over what you can't plan out 5 years with precision. You can plan next year, 2 years out.
Yep.
But it's necessarily overstated, and therefore it's necessarily outside of the Board of Finance guidelines because we never expect we're going to do all, but you have to plan for it.
But Kevin, if I may, we have had the 5-year plan, then we've had projects basically somersault to the front of the line, like the SAC school project.
Yeah, that's
It's
again.
not the 5-year plan.
well, the 2012, there was no Saks Middle School project in it, and there was no, what was the other large item? But that's an indication. I mean, it's not science. You have to see what develops. Although that problem with, you know, overcrowding at Saks was developing for years. So,
Rich, I'm going to go on a limb. I think one of the reasons why the Board of Finance asked for our input, I'm not saying that they wouldn't always enjoy having our input, but in particular this year, is that it was somewhat jarring that they had really in the end, when you look at how their process worked out, retrospect, they had a fundamentally different process than ours. And I think that bothers them. And the way they're different is that the Board of Finance accepted from day one, this is just my understanding, the reality that you can have a hard budget cap target, or not a hard one, but a target, but then real life interferes. And what specifically happened is that they viewed the $1 million of start time changes as something that needed to be done outside of the normal flow. And whatever they would normally have approved, they just were intending to add that on, and that's effectively what they did. It was a flexible project, and it had a rather remarkable outcome of, at the end of the day, the mill rate was still level. The result for taxpayers was excellent. That was their process. Our process was to impose a hard cap and say, you know, if you want to do start times, you're going to have to do that out of your own pocketbook. Very different. And you know, people can obviously disagree on which is the more appropriate, but we weren't on the same page. And I think the question that some of the Board of Finance people are wondering is, are we going to be on the same page? Now, it's hard for us to answer that because we don't know what they prefer to do as the next step. And I'm not sure, you know, that they've really figured that out yet because they're different schools of thought. But what I would certainly espouse is, is that we not lock ourselves into a hard cap ever again when it might interfere with an incredibly important goal of the town, which is to maintain great schools. I think we screwed that up and we need to rethink it. So I can't not mention that issue as we talk about budgeting.
I think, just let me respond to that. I think you're right, but I think the way the first bullet is stated here leaves scope for that. Because it says, let's use inflation as a benchmark for spending. And therefore we have an explanation going forward to our citizens that, yeah, we're up $1 million and we're up $1 million because we want your kids to sleep in. And that's why we did it, right? Inherent in that is understanding that the rest of the spending is efficient and effective in getting the support, the stuff we need. I think it's very interesting that all of us study how many pencils everybody spends year to year and how many things are everywhere. I mean, we all spend 6 months doing that. The Board of Finance does it. All of us on the town council do the same analysis. Well, I don't understand why we don't believe the Board of Finance's analysis and say, are they efficient or should we cut the budget? If you didn't budget, are you expecting us to cut it or are they efficient? Have you given us the plan you really think is right? And can we believe that so we can talk about the larger issues of should we do start times or should we do something else? As opposed to arguing over what I view as minor spending changes year to year. I'd like to really understand, and I'd like the Board of Finance to explain to us when they come in. Here's what we think the great plan is. And what I loved last year was both Kevin and Todd wrote a letter that was published in the paper about the results of the budget and the results of the year. And I thought as a citizen, I loved it. I understood it. It was very simple. It was very high level. And it made me feel like we were really under control. And I think we are really under control. And I think that's very important. And I think that this kind of process would get us there. The Board of Finance can do all the analysis they should do to figure out whether they're efficient or not. And whether the place is efficient. If it's not, cut their expense and then bring it to us. And then when you get here, give us the top level of the plan. What'd you do? I'm over inflation I'm growing by 3%, not 1.5%. And it is because we're investing in these things that are important to the town to get done. The capital plan is under because we did these with the pavement program because we don't need to. It wasn't efficient anymore. We solved that problem. And so that there's a storyline. I love the storylines in the paper that Kevin and Todd put out, but we didn't talk about any of that when we went through the budget process. We didn't talk about how we were meeting the objectives of the town. We didn't talk about how much money we were spending. We just really talked about the spend rates relative to a what everyone would view as an arbitrary target. I want the growth to be 2%. Why do you want it to be 2%? Because I think it's a good number. Well, let's just say 1.5% or whatever inflation is, and say it's inflation. It's inflation. And if you can't meet inflation, tell me why not. And a lot of the answer will always come back, contractual obligations. And okay, I got it, contractual obligations. We can't do anything about contractual obligations in the current budget year. But I should hope that we should be able to do something about them in the next 2 years, which is why I look at the projections. So where does the projections on where these kind of contractual obligations put us? And let's understand if that's the road we want to be on. Just that simple. Penny.
I have a question. And this is something that I think I've asked before, but I obviously hasn't stuck. Is our percentage that we are aiming to meet for an increase in the budget, is it based on last year's budget or is it based on the actual?
Linda, can you answer that?
I think I know what the answer is, but I have a problem with it.
Historically, I think the last two guidance, the change rate has been budget to budget. So it's been current year's approved budget versus the next year's budget, even though we do show ratios for actuals, but the target has been based on budget to budget.
So why do we want to do that if departments come in at an amount under what was the suggested, or which was the budget? Because that's actually what it takes to run the department, not X plus the percentage of next year. It is X minus Y, then the percentage on top of that.
And that's not really correct. For example, the police, have to budget for their full complement of force, but oftentimes they have a retirement or they have someone leave, and it takes a long time to replace those officers. So just and they police in particular traditionally come in under budget. That doesn't mean they're not going to need the full force. They're operating under force, and that happens in fire to a certain extent. Not so much in public works, but so there's always variables that from why the actual is lower. It could be it's higher because we have a bad winter and Tigers got a lot more overtime. So.
But you see why I'm uncomfortable with that? Because you.
So Linda's point was you're going to begin to display it as well. Actually, Michael Chen asked that this be done. Show both two columns, one budget to budget and one's budget actual to budget. So you.
Okay, but what do you base your percentage increase on? Is really my question. So.
You could do.
I think that's the answer. The question is, do you want to see it? Mr. Chen wants to see it both ways. I think seeing it both ways would be good as well. In the end, it'll be historic. By year, looking back a long ways, it'll be historic to historic to historic to historic, right? One of the problems is when we put the budget together, you don't have a historic for the year that's going to become the one you compare against. You're estimating.
Just like the Board of Education last year, when they suddenly decided they could take $2 million out of their insurance reserve, that $2 million helped the overall budget greatly, but that's not a recurring item.
Right.
So.
Showing it both ways is a great idea. Just keep in mind that we won't have 12 months of actual when we go through the budgeting process.
It'll be an estimate. It'll be a forecast.
Right.
All right, so what I heard was two things. What I took away, two sentences. One, Rich doesn't want to be surprised when they vote yes or they vote no. He wants an explanation that says we voted yes because it met our guidelines, or we voted yes because it did not meet our guidelines, but this is why we made the exception. So you don't feel like you got that explanation last year, and that's one change you want to make. And the second is you want to tie it to some metric. You want some plan in advance that you said goes back a couple of years and goes forward a couple of years. And I'm going to play devil's advocate, and I'm going to give you 2 reasons why not to do that. We've gone to the schools in the past and we've said to them, can you give us a projection a couple years out? And they've said no. And therefore they said any attempt to say, well, we're going to match inflation is not tied to reality, because our reality here is we build our budget based on how many students show up, and we don't know how many students are going to show up this year and how many are going to show up on September 1. So there's a whole lot of things going on that we can't predict. And so that's one reason that we cannot tie this to inflation, and we cannot tie it to inflation forward looking 2 years in advance. That would be one argument. The second argument might be another externality. New Canaan felt very differently about the real estate market a year ago and 3 years ago, and may feel differently a year from now. And your plan discounts that entirely. It says basically we need to build a budget that's tied to inflation. And I get why you want that, because you want predictability. But unfortunately, or fortunately, the real estate market doesn't work that way. And the real estate market underpins our revenues. So last year, if you had said, we know that the real estate market is going to behave consistently for the next couple of years and grow at 2%, then your idea would be a good one. But we had no idea that it was going to go down something like 8% in the last reval, and that it would have the potential to go up sharply now. So that's 2 reasons. 1, they have difficulty predicting, and 2, we have difficulty predicting our underlying revenue base.
Can I address that, John, both of them? The first one is we're trying to give input to the Board of Finance on what would go in the letter. Right. And I just wouldn't, I think you can ask in the letter, I'd like to see a projection, because you know what? I can do it. And every time I've done it, Kevin always gets mad. But if the Board of Education won't do it, Linda can do it. Any of us can do it with an Excel spreadsheet in about 10 minutes. George did it last year, right? And then we say, oh, but we can't estimate this stuff. But you know what? You can estimate whether you can make inflation. Are you going to assume that salaries are going to go up 3%? Salaries and benefits go up 3% a year for the next 2 years? You won't make inflation. This is not hard, right? We might not want to look at it, but it's not hard, right? And we ought to understand it. If we don't want to look at it, we ought to understand why. So that's a point number 1. This is a budget letter. We can ask them to do something. They cannot do it. Okay. So when they come in, maybe we show them this was our analysis on that, right? And I know what goes along with that. But that's point number 1. Point number 2 is, for the past 5 years, the spending and the budget has had nothing to do with real estate values. There's been a lot of consternation all over how the reevaluation was going to do it, et cetera. But you know what? We didn't change our spending diddly as a result of when our house prices plummeted or our house prices are going up. That's not going to give me any more money when it goes up to pay taxes. I only get money when I make income. But we have had this discussion in at least 2 or 3 different finance committee meetings. Should we tie this to income, or should we tie it to net worth or something else? And that has always come back unanimously. Townsend, you're really a jerk. We can't do that. It just won't work. And so that's why it's not even in the letter. It's been in the letter for the last 2 years. Is we ought to do something relative to town income or town available resources. I gave up. I just took it out. So,
no, Rich, nobody who uses the word diddly could appropriately be called a jerk. So let's get through that. But I disagree with John on the relevance of property values. We figure out, in the way Rich described it earlier, we figure out, what we need, what we want. And then we figure out, how do we do it efficiently? We appropriate the money, and we define a mill rate accordingly. Nowhere in that process is it necessary or even relevant to ask what fair market value is of properties. Obviously, people are happier, and I guess they're going to be more willing to pay taxes if their property values are going up rather than down. But I think that the idea that there's a direct relationship, or that we rely on our real estate as a funding source or as a revenue source, it's just, I don't think that's the right way to look at it. I think that we
Take the word real estate out of the equation. What I'm saying is that in the past, we have used the argument ability to pay. Let's start using that instead.
Okay. All right. Affordability. Yeah.
We say we don't have that much money. Now, I'm not going to use the word real estate, but we say we don't have that much money, and therefore we need you to tighten up, town departments, Board of Education. And so what happens when the converse is, when the inverse is true? What happens when we feel like we got a sudden increase in revenue? I'm not arguing with Rich. I'm just pointing out that is an argument that keeps coming up.
Yeah, and 2 years ago, I had a discussion with you. I guess it was the group, and I said we have to focus on affordability. But I've actually done a lot of thinking about that recently, and I no longer think that really makes sense. Obviously, there are limits. Tying with inflation is a constraint in what we spent. But I don't think we can. We're really smart enough, or do we have the data to decide what people are willing or able to pay to live in New Canaan? You know, a lot of people, I was one of them, moved to New Canaan and lived in a shack, you know, that I had to spend 2 years, rehanging all the wallboard so that I could send my kids to these schools. Everybody defines what their priorities are and therefore what's affordable to them. So I just think we have a consensus that we want great schools, and I'm picking on schools as the example. It's what I think about the most. And I know we can afford to pay for great schools. So why don't we just focus on efficiency and inflation and leave the affordability out of it?
Agree.
Wow.
I think that this is the worst time to leave affordability out, just as a term. I think we can use a better phrase to define what we mean.
Well, yeah, we can talk about it, but is it a constraint is it a factor in the budget process?
It is when it comes to the negotiation of union contracts, and it does when it comes to certain things that are within our control if we put some parameters.
If we really want efficiency and streamline it, to spend as little money as we can to get a given product, then that drives you to reanalyze your union contracts. But there are other factors as well. We want and we have great teachers. So it's not a unitary analysis of the contracts. And by the way, Rich, I mentioned this in the finance committee meeting. I was reading a book about education funding, and I didn't realize this, but there's a database that would allow us to look at what the cost of labor is in our market. So if we decide that we want great teachers, we can go into this database and find out in our market, what does that cost? So it's a more directed and I think specific concept of inflation than we might otherwise use.
That's good. That's good. We ought to use it. I mean, if we're going to have the best education, we're not going to have it by paying the teachers the cheapest salary. Yeah, I know that.
That's already determined in the contracts. I mean, I just think we have a lot of knowns. We know who our teachers are. We know how long they've been teaching. We know where they are in the steps. We can speculate when they might retire in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. Maybe just focusing on salaries and the next contract that comes up, there might be ways to incentivize our highest paid teachers, to not, I don't want to push anyone out, but maybe some people would leave or would retire because it felt like the right time. And it might be worth it in the long run because that's 2/3 of the budget. So I don't know, if you don't really manage that 2/3, at least understand where our teachers are, what number are 1 to 10-year teachers, 10 to 20-year teachers. I mean, that alone, without even doing anything, you could at least project down the road what your expenses will be. And then, when the contract comes up for negotiation, maybe there'll be some solutions that everyone would be happy with that would save us money in the long run.
Are you suggesting that we invent a disease that disproportionately affects the elderly?
Yeah, retirement. No, but I mean, some districts will pay out the difference. I think the way the retirement works is it's a % of their best 3 years, I think. I don't know for sure, but if there was a way where they didn't lose out anything, but you made room for new teachers who start at the beginning of the scale, maybe you could balance things out a little more. And you bring fresh blood in, learning, the teachers can learn from the other teachers, and you kind of grow your staff on a rolling basis. But of course, you'd have to look at everything first and see where it falls right now.
I think that's the benefits of projection, is you can get ready for the next teacher negotiation and perhaps influence the contracts. Maybe you can't too. I don't know. Maybe you can't. But if you don't look at a projection, you won't have any idea whether it's a problem or not.
I mean, it could be appealing to some teachers if you wanted to leave a year early and it didn't affect you because your contract allowed for it.
It's 9:38, John. We could go on forever, but I think the value of this is just having the discussion, and the Board of Finance can listen to it, and I will talk to all of the folks, Chris Labrie and George Blauvelt and Michael Chen and Todd Lavieri all came to the subcommittee meeting where we had this discussion. And so they've all been deeply immersed in this. And, we talked about a lot of things that we didn't talk about here just because I wanted to try and get focused around something. But anyways, I think that we've got a tremendous opportunity here, which is to get input into the letter. And this is kind of what I suggested. I don't want to vote or anything, but if somebody else would like something different or something added to this, let me know, and we'll communicate to it what, if nothing else, you're concerned about. And we're concerned about. I know the following: if we don't ask for it in the letter, you won't get it. I just know that, right? I mean, the letter says, send us your budget in the same detail you did last year. So I know exactly what the budget's going to look like when it comes in here. It's going to have the same columns and the same rows. And I think that's a lot of data.
Okay. So there's no vote. I guess the discussion is over for now, but if you have any further input, see Rich.
But I'll tell you what, the action is not over until they send their letter out, right? And then we start the budget process. You got a chance to influence the budget process now. You won't after the letter goes out.
Right. Okay.
Hey, Rich, just the fact that we had 4 of the Board of Finance join your subcommittee meeting is an excellent sign. I mean, that's something that hasn't happened in the past. And I have to applaud you for pushing it to the point where we are now. Now, if we could just push it over the finish line, we're almost there. So you've got 4 of the best that we have on the Board of Finance working with you. And, I applaud the idea that we have this letter. It was a roadmap last year. It was great to have. And I say, let's go. Let's do it again. So I think it's a great piece of work that comes out of it. So I fully support it.
Good, thank you.
Okay, if there's nothing further, let's move to committee reports. We have updates from the committees, bylaws and ordinances. Mark Jimsky and Steve Carl.
Nothing at the moment.
No ordinances?
Nope.
Nothing planned. But
we can't even get into town hall. So as soon as we get back into town hall, we're gonna rock and roll. But right now.
But Steve, you always talk about eliminating ordinances. This would be a good time to get rid of a few ordinances. Comb through that book.
There you go.
Okay. Conservation. Oh, my favorite. Robin and Rich, go ahead.
Well, for the conservation, Friends of Bristow did their fundraiser for Bristow. They raised 10,000. They were matched 10,000 by Sustainable Connecticut. That finished. Plant New Canaan did a fundraiser for the food scrap program, raised 4,000, matched 4,000 by Sustainable Connecticut. That goes in the end of October. There was a tour today with the Conservation Commission, the transfer station. Chris Shipper, the chair, Selectman Corbett was there. I was there. Went over the food scrap program. Tiger Man and Don Smith were there. Looked at the location for food scrap. We also looked at possible locations for a swap shop or take it, leave it. Tiger mentioned a tent-like structure, which is what Darien had at first. Sustainable Connecticut has said that they would match any fundraising efforts. We also took a tour of the old incinerator, and it's really, I'm very glad they're getting that new structure because that was horrible. There were exposed wires. The guys should not have been there for their rec room. We did look at the incinerators. As Tiger mentioned earlier, we looked at what the incinerator they're using now is the salt shed. And it's a problem because the salt trucks, that when they deliver, they can't deliver into the structure. They have to leave it outside, and then the loaders have to push it in. That creates a noise issue for some of the neighbors. If anyone's seen the incinerator, it damages the top because sometimes the trucks hit it. But Tiger said to put up a new salt shed would be about $500,000. But it would help with Downriver Road with some of the noise they're having. Well, that's it. We looked on the outside of animal control, which needs a new roof, but it's electric heat. It's not a good situation. And that's about it.
And what about the land trust is eligible to be exempt from property taxes? I know they've asked for this. Is this something coming out of your committee?
No, so the Conservation Commission should bring that up at their next meeting, but what you're talking about is the Connecticut General Statutes, Title 12, Chapter 203, Section 1281. It's the municipal option to abate real or personal property taxes paid by a nonprofit land conservation organization. So if someone were to donate property to, let's say, Land Trust, Land Trust then has to say to them, okay, thank you, but can you give us money for, the taxes are still due for that tax period. So that might sway some people not to donate their land if all of a sudden they have to pay $10,000. So what this state statute allows is that the town to do a tax abatement so people don't have to pay that. So that therefore, but it's just for land conservation nonprofits. It couldn't be for any other nonprofits.
That's going to come to us from the Conservation Commission.
The Conservation Commission will bring it up, I believe, at their next meeting. They'll discuss it, and then I believe that then the way it should work, I believe, is then they'll contact the ordinance committee to go over it.
Okay. Thank you.
Love it.
Who said they love it?
I did. I love it.
Oh, all right. Okay.
That's undeveloped property, right?
Yeah.
All right. Education, Tom, since you seem to be fired up. Education, Tom and Maria.
I think I've said enough. We got a lot of education tonight.
I agree.
Next, finance and government, Mark and Rich.
I think, Rich.
We're good?
Unless Mark's got
that-
something to say, I think I've talked too
No.
much as it is.
No, John, I'll save our spirited debate about mill rate for another day. So we'll just, but anyway, no, we're done. We don't have anything.
Okay. Health and Human Services, Liz and Penny. Don't tell me you got nothing, because Health and Human Services has never been more important than during COVID. Penny, you got to unmute. You can't just nod at us.
Sorry, because
All
you
right.
muted me earlier.
I don't mute. Go ahead.
No, they are extremely busy.
with the food program, and they are in constant touch with just all kinds of people in town. They have quite a network between LAPM and Staying Put and Meals on Wheels and Get About and Health and Human Services. So they really, know who among our elderly or disabled need services, and they're right on top of it. The programs, the online programs from LAPM, Aggie has done a great job organizing the programs. So there's no opportunity to be bored with what she's got on the schedule. Liz, do you have anything? The other thing I'd mention, yeah, I mean, they've been going full blast since, they've always been very effective and hardworking, but, their job has become immeasurably more complex with COVID, and they've really stepped up to it. I would also just mention that they've also worked very hard in conjunction with League of Women Voters to make sure that people are aware of voting information and how to get polls and all that. So that's been a really nice integrated effort, and Health and Human Services has worked closely with the league to just make sure people understand what their options are. Right, there was some concern as to whether or not seniors should be encouraged to use Get About and to actually go to the polls. And after some discussion, it was really pretty universally felt that that's a personal choice of a senior if they are comfortable getting in the van. It's one person in the van. It is cleaned between rides. I'm assured that the polling places are going to be properly cleaned. So if an individual feels comfortable leaving home and getting on the van and coming to vote, that's just fine. That's their choice.
Okay. Next committee report is infrastructure and utility. No, yes. No, Health and Human Services, Infrastructure and Utilities. Christina and Penny.
Okay, the update that we have already heard about Waveney. So the next project is the West Road Bridge. They're waiting for coordination for disconnection of the utilities before it can be put back on track. And the last thing is the gas line, that they're encouraging the gas line to go into, I believe it's phase 3 for the in-town hookups. And Tiger has identified 11 different locations, which means 11 different routes, streets, and waiting to hear on that. And I don't have much of anything else. Just Penny?
Right, no, Kevin's, at the beginning of the meeting went through all of the solar and everything else that's going on down there in the nerve central of the town. So you got that at the beginning of the meeting.
Okay, next, land use recreation, Robin, Maria.
We met, our subcommittee met on October 7th, and we got an update from Mike Benevento, who talked about the New Canaan Athletic Fund Enterprise Zone. And he sent an email out to the town council, but basically said it did very well this summer. It made the fields available to lacrosse. It actually was up 99% in their revenues, and they would have made more if things hadn't been canceled. So overall, it was really, really positive, and they're looking forward to doing more. Steve Benko gave us an update on Kiwanis, and he said that, we had all agreed that Kiwanis would be open to the public from 5 to 7, but it came up that the YMCA couldn't really get out of the park until like 5:30, so that kind of cut down on the number of public hours. And it was
5:30 to 7, right?
What did I say? 5:30 to 7. So it's just something we may want to think about for next year if we do the same kind of arrangement, to build in time for them to leave. He said it was overall a very short season. They weren't able to do any reinventing, like we were talking about finding better or popular uses for Kiwanis, which I really hope they do. The paddle court, he said, was open. A pool, he mentioned the pool attendance was up about 400 people from the previous year. But since the season was cut short, there was really no increase in revenue. He mentioned the new access road that's getting a lot of use, which the Board of Ed talked about on the call earlier. And then as far as land use, I mean, this is something that not our state rep, but Gail Lavielle posted about this bill that's circulating that is similar to the regionalization, a bill that might make transportation areas certain zones that fall under state control. So it's not entered yet, but it's just something I think we should be aware of and stay on top of, because it would affect a lot of us. And I think that's it.
Hey, John, one thing about that meeting, Robin obviously organized a great meeting, but Maria Naughton set the New Canaan total speed record for minutes. I was closing my iPad and I received the minutes of that meeting. Never before have I ever seen that before. It was amazing. Absolutely amazing. Maria, you're unbelievable.
Wait till
Anytime you want to
Tucker
be
gets
on,
going. Wait till Tucker gets going. I'm sure that Tucker will give her a run for her money.
Oh, we have competition.
Not a chance.
All right, excellent. Thank you. And public safety, Liz and Mike.
Yeah, I can handle. Hold on. Sure. Hello. For police, pretty quiet. The next big thing they're looking at is their building committee and getting that up and running, and just focusing on having their meetings. One thing that I found interesting with the police, the extra duty that they can be hired for. So they have about $260,000 that is more than 31 or more days due and owing. That's a large amount of money. So I know, and that goes through the finance department for collections. So that's something that I think there should be as great an emphasis as possible as we can to recoup that money, because that is a lot. Whereas I think there's about $10,000 due on false alarms. That's over 120 days. So that number stuck out to me. I just thought it'd be worth noting to the town council's attention. About $250,000 just sitting out there. That's that needs to get paid. As far as fire goes, Sven was kind enough to send around a photo from Chief Hennessy of the new rescue truck and the delivery to the shop where it'll get all tricked out with its bells and whistles. That truck should be in service by Memorial Day, as far as I understand, which would be great. Hopefully we can actually have a night town parade this year, hopefully. The fire department is also in the process of interviewing for the fire marshal position, because as you know, Fred Baker is heading off into the sunset, so to speak. So that process is underway. And I guess there'll be more from an announcement at some point when the candidate is selected. But other than that, I don't think there's anything else for the fire and police.
Okay. Michael Chen asked me if there was anything I wanted to bring up when they were going through it. And I said, I would like a report on the cameras. I know that we were asked to approve a budget for cameras. I know that we've been told that we can't get a report on exactly what the plan was and then what was spent and what the rollout was on security cameras. But at some point, I'd like an update on, even if I can't find out where the cameras are or how many we bought, because that's, a security concern. I still think at some point we need a report on what happened over the last year and what's going to happen next. So
Will do. I've asked the police department for an update on that, and I'll work with them to get better bearing on where they are at. Whether it's out of their hands at this point, they're waiting on some other external input, external to the police department, maybe getting stuck somewhere. I don't know, but I'll find out and I will report back.
For all I know, it's already in place and working marvelously. I just figure, we should know.
I can tell you it's not. It's not in place. I can tell you that.
Okay.
It's in motion, Michael.
I know, but it's not in place. I mean, that's what John was asking.
I have no idea. So now I at least know it's in motion, not in place. Okay.
I thought we reported, maybe I reported to the Board of Finance, you know, it's approved a few months ago and it's in motion, so.
When do you think it'll be implemented?
It's, well, in motion means it's being implemented. You know, the backbone is the most important thing.
Okay. So that's it, public safety. If there's nothing else, I guess we can entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Okay, Christina. Anyone else? Yep, Steve. All right, all in favor? Yeah, we are adjourned at 9:56. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Go out and vote.
Bye all.